Oh, yes. For making my work. You have only love. Making a confident.
Good evening. I'd like to call the June 5th, 2023 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks? Here. Mrs. Marshall? Here. Mrs. White? Here. Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Cooney?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is the reading and disposal of the journal. We have a set of minutes from May 15, 2023. Mrs. Thomas, did you supplement with my report for those meetings?
Yes, I did. And I noticed that on the front page, I have May 1st.
So besides the date, are there any other additions or changes to the minutes? Otherwise, is there a motion?
So.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second? I'll second that. Second by Mr. King. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks? Abstain. Mrs. Marshall? Abstain. Mrs. Weiss? Yes. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye. And motion carries. Next is additions and removals from the agenda and referrals to committee. Are there any additions, removals, or referrals?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to add, right after AEP, appointments of, building committee head.
After A, you said?
Yeah.
Said head home, chair. Okay, we have a motion then by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Sacks. Discussion. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks.
Aye.
Mrs. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wallace.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Aye. Okay, the agenda is so amended. Are there any other additions or removals to the agenda or referrals to the committee? Seeing none, we will now move on to comments from the audience. Speakers may take up to 5 minutes. Is there anybody here who would care to address the city this evening? If so, please come on up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please speak into the microphone and you may take up to 5 minutes.
I got no mayor count. My question is,
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
my name is Ruben Moultrie, 2463 Charney Road. Longtime resident, of the city, proud to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Moultrie. You may proceed.
My question has to do with the rubbish collection. The big ordinance that deal with the rubbish collection in the city. The ordinance. that deal with rubbish collection.
Well, this is public forum. It's not really a Q&A, but I can tell you as a matter of information that there are a number of ordinances.
Okay.
That's all right, but you may go ahead.
Second thing, the reason why I'm asking because I don't see any uniform method of rubbish placement in the city. Some streets, rubbish is placed on the tree lawn, and others in the backyard. And then some streets, you see bulk items staying on the tree lawn for a week. I know in the past, there has been fee that the city requires for special collection. But I don't know if that's taking place because I see very fast in the city. Items, bulk items that are placed on the tree lawn. And this city, 1% Road and Cedar Road is the gateway to our city. And it's a reflection on how the city looks. If you have tracks all over the tree lawn, rubbish, bulk items, that's a reflection on the city. And one other thing, I know a survey was taken, I participated in surveys in Bolivar concerning rubbish collection. Had that rubbish, I hadn't seen, the results that survey. And I think I just want to bring this to council and we need to take a look at some things in the city. I know you're going to do a very well job in the city, but rubbish collection is something that makes credit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moultrie. And I think without getting into particulars, it is a subject that many of us have thought about and discussed at length. And certainly, I can tell you that there have been probably about 200 bulk collections in the month of May. They were all paid for. And people may take their trash up to the curb, even though we have backyard pickup. That's often something that residents will do if they leave cars parked in the driveway. The Kubotas will not drive around parked vehicles. Or if they have a gate that's closed in the back, they need to move it up front because our service department does not open gates for various reasons. So, but that said, I'm happy to speak with you further about where we are and where we could be going on trash collection, rubbish collection at your convenience. And feel free to contact my office or Mr. Cook, if you're out there, could you get get Mr. Mulvey's contact information? It's my okay, great, thank you.
I would appreciate it also, Mr. Cook. Thank you. If you'd get it from us.
You may proceed. Start with your name and address, please.
My name is Kyle Herman. I live at 3652 Highwood Avenue in Stowe. I'm visiting your city today because I'm the executive director of Rank Ohio, which is a statewide nonpartisan nonprofit for ranked choice voting that was founded by volunteers back in 2020. And we just wanted to thank the Charter Review commission members here today for being very forward thinking and including recommendation to add an amendment for ranked choice voting to the November ballot. And we want to thank council for your careful consideration of this potential change and for potentially allowing voters to vote on whether to make this change in November. And we wanted to offer ourselves as a resource, as an organization. Our mission is to provide public education about ranked choice voting. We have national partners who have already been working with members of the Charter Review Commission as they develop a proposal, including Fair Vote and the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. And now that ranked choice voting is being used successfully in 60 cities across the country, this is a huge opportunity for a city in Ohio, University Heights, to be the first in a long time to use ranked choice voting. I'm not sure if you know about the history of ranked choice voting in Ohio, but I can recommend this book called Proportional Representation and Election Reform in Ohio by Kathleen Barber, who was actually a professor at John Carroll. Yeah, great, yes. She was a professor at John Carroll University, and she wrote about how ranked choice voting or variations of it were actually used in Ohio, starting in Cleveland in 1913 and used in other cities such as Cincinnati, Ashtabula, Hamilton, and Toledo up into the 1960s. And it became a victim of its own success because it was too good at giving greater diversity of representation to constituents in terms of not only race and gender, but also ethnicity and ideology. And so that's why the party bosses of the time and the KKK conspired to get rid of it. And so it was ahead of its time then, but University Heights is a great opportunity to bring it back. And Rank the Vote Ohio, as we've been doing our public education, we've identified about 9,000 supporters across Ohio, including a couple hundred here in University Heights. And when we've been talking with people in your community, they've been very open and receptive and excited about the idea and the fact that University Heights could be a leader in this new era. Because Ohio elections in general have this problem of not requiring a majority to win. And so oftentimes we get candidates who win with 30 or 40% of the vote. And ranked choice voting, it's just an instant runoff to fix that. And we've heard that you all have had great questions and great discussions about it already, but we just want to make ourselves available between now and when you vote in order to continue the conversation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you could also leave your contact information with Mr. Cook, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Please come on, state your name and address for the record.
Michael Meliscus, 2592 University Boulevard. I also wanted to speak in favor of the ranked choice voting amendment that's being proposed tonight. One thing that is mentioned in the paperwork, but maybe not highlighted enough, is that ranked choice voting strongly encourages cooperation. It discourages extreme candidates who cause a lot of discord, and we've had complaints from the mayor, members of the city council, and the community. So we have gotten into a bad habit of some acrimonious dealings here on the committee. Ranked choice voting, make sure that people can vote against people they don't like, as well as for people they do like. And so I think it would be a good idea for us to adopt to encourage everyone in this forum to work together rather than working against each other. And it will more accurately reflect the desires of the.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Moses. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening?
Hello, my name is Sean Belt, 2292 Canterbury Road. I'd like to thank the Charter Review Commission for 11 months of hard work and for working as a collaborative team to put together what I think are a number of proposals that are forward-thinking, are overdue, and are all good for all of our citizens to be able to vote on. And if through the discussion tonight, it seems like 10 would be too many to try at one time. I think a good solution for that would be to agree that all of them deserve to be put in front of the voters and then choose a timeline for how many you would like to put on each ballot at a time. But I think that they're all worthy of being voted on. I think that it makes most sense when the largest amount of people are able to decide how they want their city to be governed. So I just want to speak in favor of all of them going to a vote. And I was really heartened and encouraged by the Charter Review Commission and all of their works. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Okay, very good. We will then move on to reports and communications from the mayor and taking of action thereon. We've got to cover this evening, so I'll keep this brief. This Thursday is the Sing Out at Summers Hall in support of the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. I will be joining a choir full of local figures to perform in support of the CRCC on Even Singing a Solo. This event is traditionally every 2 years due to the pandemic's first live and in-person Sing Out in 5 years. The first since my first Sing Out in 2018. Tickets are still available at clevelandrapecrisis.org/singout. This coming Sunday, June 11th, is the University Heights Bike with the Mayor event, part of the Bike with the Mayor series with Cuyahoga County. I'm delighted to have Councilmember Brian King as the co-host of this event. It will be this Sunday at the Walt, 12:30 p.m. meetup, 1 p.m. start. It is an organized ride with a route. We ask that you wear a helmet. And while there will be a bike check and check-in, it would be a good idea to give your bike a once over in advance to make sure you're working brakes, air tires, and so on. Please register for the event on the city website. There's also a link in the city Facebook page event. Thursday next week is the opening of the summer concert series with return engagement by Rubik's Groove. That will be Thursday, June 15th at 7 p.m. at the Walt. Next Sunday, June 18th, is the Juneteenth event. Details and schedule are in the mosaic. 2 stages, free music headlined by Crazy Bone of Bone Thugs and Harmony. Fun for the whole family as we celebrate America's Black Independence Day. This morning, I gave testimony at County Council Committee on the subject of a proposed countywide pay to stay legislation. Such legislation would mirror recent legislation in place in Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, Euclid, Lakewood, Maple Heights, Newburgh Heights, South Euclid, and Lawrenceville Heights. What pay to stay legislation does is provide that the payment of rent due plus a reasonable late fee prior to the execution of an eviction shall be an affirmative defense to an eviction. Under current law applicable to our city, after a landlord serves a 3-day notice to move out for non-payment of rent, a landlord may refuse to accept payment and opt to even go ahead and evict the tenant who would otherwise be willing and able to pay and would make a tender of that full payment amount. I applaud the effort here at the county level by our county council member Cheryl Stevens and her colleague council member Dale Miller. Having discussed it with our Housing and Community Development Director Jeff Engelbrecht, we intend to advance legislation on this matter, irrespective of where the county measure leads. Under home rule and for the terms of the proposed county ordinance, an ordinance we might pass that is different on the subject from the county, our ordinance would still nevertheless control. Thank you. This concludes my report. Next on the agenda, reports and communications from the city council and taking of action. Ron, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Council of the Whole Facilities and Infrastructure Committee meeting discussed an owner's rep RFQ that will be forthcoming after the summer recess in September. Other council committees were Service Committee and Safety Committee, which both had robust discussions. And the Safety Committee has a proclamation that is on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Are there any other reports or communications from city council members? Seeing none, we will then turn to reports and communications from the directors of various departments. We'll start with finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of points of interest. Council knows that we did file a draft audit. prior to the May 30th deadline, so that's filed with the Auditor of State's office. The final field work for the audit, this is for the year ended December 31st, 2022. Final field work will take place over the next couple of weeks, and we expect our final audit report to be issued in draft form by June 30th. So everybody apprised of that, and we'll be one account of the draft financial statements. Those are converted statements, and we are on a cash basis for the state. By GAAP basis, generally accepted accounting principles. A couple other points of interest, we did receive in May our annual RETA refund. RETA withholds 3% from all our collections as a retainer fee. Once a year, they reconcile the expenses and net those out against the total collections. And if there is an overage, the city gets a proportional amount remitted back to them. So our refund this year was approximately $282,000. That came in towards the tail end of last week. And just some preliminary numbers in terms of where we stand through the end of May. Net revenue for the year, $7.69 million. Net expenses, $6.67 million. So our expended balance at the end of May, this is all unreconciled as of today, but it's going to be close $7,567,020. That's for the general fund. For all funds, our net revenue through May 31st, a little over 10 million. Net expenses were a little over 8 million. So our unexpended balance for all funds is 11.5 million as of the end of May. And we did make another transfer to the investment account, so we are approaching 7.9 million. And so that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Very good, thank you. Director Vaughn.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I wanted to let you know that of the several ordinances that were requested out of the Building and Housing Committee, 3 will be ready for first reading at your next council meeting, including an ordinance relating to creating a uniform schedule for rental registrations, an ordinance that would update and create enforcement mechanisms in connection with locating trash cans forward of the rear foundation line. And finally, an ordinance that would create rights of inspection with respect to individual units in apartment buildings. In addition, I will have the suggested and updated revisions to the short-term rental ordinance for your committee meeting, building and housing on the 20th, and an updated campaign contribution ordinance for your finance committee on the 27th.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Any questions from Mr. McConnell? Okay, we will then go to Public Safety Police, Chief Rogers. And no report. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Burko. Okay, no report. Thank you, Chief. Service, I will simply refer everyone back to the report that I gave at the last service and facilities meeting and incorporate those remarks as fully restated here. Next, then we will go to housing and community development, Mr. Engelbrecht. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. City Engineer, Mr. Cheney.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My report is mostly on the 2 items that are on the agenda tonight, but I did want to report that the 2023 street striping program has begun. We gave a notice to proceed as of today. They will be doing the side streets during the day, and they'll be doing the main roads at night. By contract, they have to be done in 30 days. And they claim they could get done in 2 weeks if the weather's different. You should see street striping happening all. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? All right, very good. Thank you. Communications and civic engagement, Mr. Cook. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. Economic development, Mrs. Drucker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give an update, as everyone knows, the Allies and this an expansion project. First, they started with the redevelopment project in their location at 2267 Warrensville Center Road. And the expansion was to the adjacent space in 2265 Warrensville Center Road. That project is almost completed. They are in the process now of submitting their application to the county health department. And then once they get those approvals, then I'd be able to give you a date of their official opening of their new expansion, which will include a sandwich shop that will be connected with the bake shop. So that project moving right along, and if anyone hasn't been in, they've done a beautiful job. Really looks so just to add to the addition of one of our destination locations for this.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Any questions from Mrs. Drucker?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now then turn to the reading and disposition of ordinances, resolutions, motions, and consideration of agenda items. And the first item is item A. Vice Mayor Michelle Weiss announces the appointment of committee assignments to Council Member Therese Marshall.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Based on Ms. Marshall's swearing in, I'm going to appoint her committee assignment to the chair of the safety committee, and it will be a member of the finance committee and economic development. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Next item then is the added item B, which is the appointment of a building committee chair.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We do now have an open council seat. And because of that, there are some building and housing ordinances that are time sensitive. So for the time being, I will appoint myself as the building and housing committee chair until that council seat is not vacant any longer. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Next then is the original item B, Charter Review Commission presentation to council regarding the proposed election ballot issues to be placed before the electorate in the November 2023 general election. I believe then that this is the presentation by our Charter Review Commission, most if not all of whom is here tonight and seated. So I'll recognize Chair Stephen Wordle and yeah, let's pass the microphone from the podium. We can hand that down. Thank you, Mr. Bell. We can hand that down to Mr. Wertheim so that you can be not only heard but recorded.
That's dangerous. Thank you, Mayor Brennan and Vice Mayor Weiss and City Council for granting us this time to present our amendments to the charter. I would like to thank Commission members, Vice Chairman Chris Myrick, Secretary Wesley Fresh, Jacqueline Gould, now Councilperson Therese Marshall, Dr. Alicia Sloan, I did it again, Tyler Bovis, Lee Cromine, David Jackson, Dr. Margaret Duffy Friedman, and David Farkas. They truly represented our community, and none of this would have been possible without their hard work and commitment. I would also like to thank Luke Conville and Mike Cicero for all their legal guidance. I was able to get over my initial feelings with Mr. Cicero for beating me in the early 90s with school board and worked closely with him. I'd especially like to thank June Brady. June was fantastic. June was responsible for herding cats, and she did an excellent job of it. Our commission was not without tragedy. Friend and community activist Rick Brown's untimely death was a great loss to our community. His contributions were invaluable to us, and the recent loss by Jackie Gould of her husband Neil is sad as well. We are glad, Jackie, that you are referring. There you go. We're glad, Jackie, that you're here with us tonight. In the summer of 2022, University Heights Council passed an ordinance 2022-25 to create a charter review commission for only the third time since the city's founding in 1941. Mayor Brennan chose 4 members of the commission, and the council persons each chose 1 person. The charter review commission met once a month met twice a month for the next 10 months. And approve the following 10 charter amendments that we hope to be voted on by the voters of University Heights, November 7th, 2023. The way we are going to do this tonight, and I hope you don't mind, is we are going to go through all 10 amendments. We promise we will be brief, but one of the reasons why the entire Charter Review Commission is here, so the individuals who brought the original amendment could speak to it. I am actually first, and I'd like to talk about I'll give you the 10. I think they're in front of you. Gender neutrality, eliminating term limits, law director appointment, Centennial Charter Review, department name modernization, ranked choice voting, recall elections, initiatives and referendums, presiding officers at council meetings, and anti-discrimination. We're going to start, and it'll be me this time, with gender neutrality. The Charter Review Commission, thank you. I was waiting for Leslie to show up. The Charter Review Commission is recommending an amendment that would replace the gender term and language throughout the city charter with gender neutral and gender inclusive terms and languages. The proposed amendment would correct the charter and replace it with language that communicates and promotes a more inclusive city and government. Our charter should better recognize and reflect all residents, those people serving our community through our city government. The proposed amendment would also replace Article 8, Section 11 of the charter, which would be I will call it superfluous, wouldn't be necessary anymore. With a new provision granting council the authority to, by unanimous vote, to make what we call substantive corrections and revisions to the charter through the legislative process. And I'm done with my comments. Mayor, do we take the questions one by one, or how are we?
That may be appropriate here because then we can discuss each of the 10. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wernheim with regard to the first item? And before I proceed, I don't want to get too bogged down in the process, but I want to make sure, because you as chair, you have different folks from the committee are going to speak with respect to various proposals. So
Yeah.
you're speaking on this one. I shouldn't be seeking to call on others regarding this first one.
I have no problem with calling on any charter review commission member. They're all involved.
Well,
If that makes sense.
I just don't want to make it
Okay.
more laborious than it needs to be. You've made a fairly comprehensive statement here. But I guess I could just add, is there anything anybody care to add from it? All right, very good. Well, then why don't we move on to, I'm sorry, Mrs. Sachs.
First of all, I want to just thank you so much. I was honored to and made it my business to attend as many as possible meetings. I made it just about everyone because I really wanted to understand and hear for myself the dialogue, the discussion, and the deep dive that everyone took. And I have to commend you for really making this huge effort to try to improve things for our city. So thank you so much. Specifically regarding gender neutrality, you asked me that I was able to have an opportunity to speak from the podium. And I looked through the ways that the gender was made more neutral throughout the entire charter. It seems that most of the terms went to positions rather than pronouns, which was my preference, as I stated, and also kind of the advice of some folks that I told you I spoke to and are sensitive to that issue. It directly relates to them. There are a couple of instances where plural pronouns are used, which is more and more accepted, but where names of the positions could still be used. And so I don't know if I asked the law director or what the process is it exactly how it's presented here tonight, or is there any opportunity to kind of comb through that again? Question, it's not a demand.
I suppose, I think you could change it, that's my, I not researched that particular issue beforehand, but, you have an ordinance before you that proposes an amendment to the charter. We have a system under our charter for, legislative approval of proposed charter amendments, so I think if you wanted to, tweak, pronoun here or there, that would be under our charter.
Well, thank you for that. You know, the other thing that I had suggested was at the end of this section, which is at the end of the charter, to have a disclaimer that people should not feel offended if the pronoun, if whatever, however persons are referred to still doesn't address how they prefer to be referred to. And I didn't see that disclaimer, but it's, again, just a thought. I don't know why that was.
One of the things I wanted to say, council consents, council purposes. I'll get that. I've got a way to go too. What I wanted to say is one of the things that we did put in this amendment was the ability to make minor changes. And, so if you took this whole plot, then basically I think where you found, as long as it didn't change, what the amendment stood for, I think you could make slight changes. Am I correct, Ms. Yeah, the lawyers over there. No, what I was saying is that one piece of this amendment calls for your ability through legislation to make minor changes. And some of the things that you may be talking about, where you find a better way to say something, taking out an apostrophe, adding a comma, if it doesn't change the amendment in any serious way, I would think that would cover that as well.
That was included, council member, that if you send this version to the ballot, that council has the power to change pronouns in the charter that are non-substantive. I would submit that the ordinance that created the Charter Review Commission really can't make any substantive changes to those proposals that the commission has referred to for council's consideration. In essence, you would vote it down and then put you on pursuit to the other provision of the charter. This would not. But
It would probably hold up the process. Though. I mean, in spirit, I believe in this, and I think it's a great thing. I think, it's good.
well, you can change if this were to be submitted to the voters and passed as written. Council then has the power to change. At any time.
We were thinking of that as well, because things are going to change.
I need to see if I understand. So it would be to vote down and then vote no, and then to come up with different pronouns, whatever.
I think there's two different concepts. One is there's a portion of this amendment that allows you to make non-substantive changes to the charter, and the idea is that changing a pronoun here or there would be non-substantive. So following approval of the charter amendment by the electorate, you could subsequently come back and enact an ordinance that would change the pronoun. But separately from that, in the event that a particular proposed charter amendment is not something you want to enact, but you want to enact something that's similar, you can reject a charter amendment and then go through your own legislative process under our charter to enact something different, or to get something on the ballot that's different. And the most recent example of our doing that is with respect to the Civil Service Commission. You may remember last year, we changed our charter by going through our legislative process and putting that issue to the voters, which they adopted.
Okay, well, thank you for taking a while to respond. Matthew. Okay. There's enough here that in the spirit it sounds it's wonderful.
And I just wanted to say it. Vice Mayor Weiss and councilperson Sachs. Well, we're almost members of our committee. They made it to almost every meeting, followed by the mayor. And thank you for being here because the technology wouldn't have worked, Vice Mayor, without you. All right, can I go to the next?
If we are finished with proposal number 1 on gender neutrality, then yes, let's move on to number 2.
The next would be eliminating term limits, and Dr. Martha Duffy, Friedman, to speak on that.
Good evening, everyone. Our commission is recommending an amendment to eliminate term limits for elected officers of University Heights. Currently, the charter limits elected officials to serve no more than 3 consecutive 4-year terms or 14 consecutive years, whether elected or appointed. This provision was approved by voters in 1995 when the movement for term limits was in favor and reached the peak throughout different parts of the country. However, since the 1990s, term limits have proven to be detrimental rather than beneficial to good government as they were intended. Academic research does show that term limits can increase the ideological polarization of legislators, can reduce legislators' expertise, capacity, and skills, weaken legislatures relative to executives, increase the influence of special interests, lobbyists, reduce voter turnout, and reduce productivity in their citations, and a report to that effect. We utilize the National Civic League Model City Charter document, and that is a publication of the National Civic League. And this league recommends against restricting the reelection of council members to subsequent terms. And it comments specifically, limiting reelection restricts the voters' opportunity to keep in office council members of whom they approve. Unlimited terms allow voters to provide a vote of confidence for council members who represent majority sentiment and a vote of opposition for members in a minority. Finally, the city benefits from the institutional memory of re-elected council members. And we have seen evidence of that through various elected officials that we have in our city. But basically, if you have an opinion about term limits, set that aside for a moment and look at the democratic constructs and principles of the topic. Term limits are undemocratic. They restrict voter choice by barring candidates from the ballot. Voters should be able to vote freely.
Cover that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So basically, term limits are undemocratic. They restrict voter choice by barring candidates from the ballot. Voters should be able to vote freely to keep a strong elected official or remove ineffective. Experienced elected officials can have historical insights, leadership skills, and legislative expertise, which can really benefit the city with ongoing and lasting positive effects beyond the current restricted term. Term limits do not improve the functions of local government, and they cost us experienced and effective elected officials with extensive institutional and community knowledge. Voters should have the choice to keep the elected officials whom they want to represent. So that's the date. Our recommendation. Would any of the other commission members like to add?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dr. Crew. Does any member of council have a question? Representative. Mrs. Sacks.
I do unless somebody else. Thank you. I really thought a lot about this and I read the comments over and over, the discussion. And a couple of things just still stick in my mind. One is that, first of all, while there is a 12 consecutive year term limit, time limited terms consecutive, person can take a 2 to 4 year break, depending on if there's an opening, within those 4 years, and then get reelected again. So it's not barring a person from having expended time, it's just that consecutive. And I think a pause is not such a bad thing because things change. I worry that people in those high positions of power in our city will be more fixated on getting reelected than working on the issues. And so, because incumbents do have the advantage. So, for that reason, I think I like it how it's my opinion. But thank you.
Did you have a question?
No, not a question. Except, to say that it's undemocratic, I'm just trying to understand again why that position is taken or why it's considered undemocratic.
Okay, who would like to address? Do you mind if I say something?
I think the reason we were looking at this is that, what we see in some bodies, and remember, we're not talking about this one, we're talking about the charter and looking into the future, that what can be lost oftentimes is institutional memory. What has been seen around the country is that replacing institutional memory often is paid lobbyists, and I'm not knocking lobbyists all, but the point being is that used to be something that's just effective at, let's say, the federal and state level, and we're seeing more and more, whether it's about utilities, or cable, or whatever, that much more lobbying activity at the local level as well. And I think our goal was is that we're saying we trust people. The reason we consider this more democratic is that we're trying to say here in this amendment, we think that citizens of University Heights can decide for themselves who should and shouldn't be elected.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Levine. Dr. Friedman, did you have anything further?
No, I welcome and appreciate my differences of opinion. That's what keeps us.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Our next person is Wesley. There you are, Wesley. I'm gonna walk this to you.
Because I've got a microphone. Oh, yeah. It's so much. Can't believe they gave it to me. And hopefully it doesn't bring out like that one. Good evening, everyone. I'm just gonna make a brief presentation on proposed amendment number 3 to the city's charter, which proposes a change to the method by which the city law director is appointed. So you can see in your packet, the charter review commission has proposed that the city certify the ballot a measure that would allow the city law director to be appointed by the mayor, subject to approval by a majority of the council. And in our discussions as a body, we discussed the fact that the mayor is already the chief executive officer of the city. The mayor is entitled to make all appointments of officers and employees of the city, except currently the director of law. But interestingly, the city's law director advises equally the council and the mayor. And in our discussions, we felt that the mayor could have a voice going forward in the selection of the city's law director, in that the mayor also receives significant amount of legal advice from the city's law director. And we felt that the proposed format does strike a fair balance in ensuring that council does have the ability to check, if you will, the mayor's appointment of the city's law director. We also included a provision in the proposed amendment that would also call for the law director removal by either the mayor or the majority of the members of council as well. And in sum, we simply feel as a body that this represents a fairer way to appoint the city's law director going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cratch. Are there any questions for Mr. Cratch by members of council? Are there any additional comments by members of the Charter Review Commission with regard to this item? If not, then thank you, Mr. Cratch, and we'll move on to the next item.
It's me again. One of the things that we noticed when we were reading the charter, and I think I have it memorized by now, is that, well, we appreciate the fact that council and the mayor felt it was time to have a charter review. We were very surprised that there was no actual date or a period of time in which charter reviews take place. It should be noted that basically, since 1941, there have only been 3 charter review commissions, one in 1979, one in 2008 and 2009, and this one 2020, 22, 23. We feel that given fast pace of change these days, there are things we are talking about today as we look towards now in the future that we can't, that we won't even be able to prepare for, and that we have no idea is going to happen 10 years from now. And so it is our suggestion, we kind of said fancy decennial charter review, but using 2023 as the beginning date is the suggestion of this, or the proposal of this commission, that we have a decennial every 10-year charter review, the next one being 2020 at 2032, 33. That's
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wertheim. Does anybody have any questions? Any councilman have any questions for Mr. Wertheim? And does any member of the commission have anything to care to add on this? Thank you, Mr. Wertheim, and let's just move on to the next item.
Yes, the next item is still me. So now take out this one. Department name modernization. That's an interesting term. But basically, we were looking at the charter, and basically the goal was to update and modernize the names of administrative offices and departments. And in particular, prohibit council from eliminating one department, one division, the Division of Public Safety. Not that I expected this council would, but again, we are a charter and we're looking towards the future. Basically, we're suggesting that the Department of Law now be called the Law Department. The Department of Finance be called the Finance Department. The Department of Public Safety become the Division of Public Safety Division, and a Service Department replacing Service Department. Service Department replaces Public Service and Properties. And basically what we are saying here, with the exception of Law and Finance Department and the Public Safety Division, the council may combine or abolish existing departments and divisions as it may deem necessary, and may authorize one person to be the head of one or two or more departments or divisions.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. Does any member of council have a question for Mr. Wertheim? If not, any other members of the commission have anything to add? Very good, thank you. Suggest we move on to the next item.
Mr. Carmron did know, speak to, ranked choice voting. The Charter Review Commission is recommending a proposed amendment would provide for the election of mayor and members of the council by ranked choice voting. This is an electoral system that allows voters to rank candidates in their order of preference. So under this proposal, voters will be able to rank up to 6 candidates in order of preference, assuming there are 6 candidates in race. Vote tabulation occurs in rounds, with votes redistributed each round until the candidate or not candidates reach required vote share. So in our mayoral races, a candidate will win if that candidate receives over 50% of the votes. So if no candidate for mayor wins in the first round and receives more than 50% of the votes, the last place candidate is eliminated. And in the next round, those ballots that had their first choice candidate eliminated will count for their next place. And the tabulation process continues until we reach a win. Someone who more than 50% of the vote. Council races will be counted a little bit differently because it will have multiple winners. In council races, the candidate will win if they reach elected threshold. That number will depend on the number of ballots cast, total number of ballots cast, and the numbers. So in the first round, each ballot will count for that balance. Highest ranked candidate. And if a candidate reaches the election threshold and is elected, their surplus votes, the number of votes over the election threshold, are then redistributed in the next round as a fraction. If not all the seats are filled, then like in the mayoral race, the lowest ranked candidate has been eliminated. And the ballots that have their first choice candidate eliminated will count in the next round. Their next. Yeah. Yeah, this process continues in rounds until all the seats uncounted are. So this process or this system, electoral system, solves a few different democratic problems. First is vote splitting. So that is when the distribution of votes among multiple similar candidates reduces the chance of winning for any of those similar candidates and increases the chance of winning for a similar candidate. It also addresses the spoiler effect, that is the presence of a non-main candidate on the ballot that affects which candidate that wins. And also helps reduce the problem of wasted votes. And that is any vote that is not represented in the final election. Every votes for a losing candidate and votes for a winning candidate in excess of the number needed for that candidate to win. And most importantly, it addresses the problem of strategic voting, which is when voters vote for candidates or party, wouldn't be a party in our case, other than their sincere preference to prevent an undesirable outcome. So with ranked choice voting, voters would be able to vote for candidates they prefer the most, rather than be forced to make a strategic choice about which candidate is most likely. So this will produce election results that are hopefully even more reflective of the elected preferences. So in our mayoral races, this would function essentially as an instant runoff when no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote. So it eliminates winning by plurality without the added cost of having to have a low turnout runoff. So in our council races, the system is much better at being able to manage larger fields of candidates. Our council would be elected in proportion to the candidate's share of votes. We would keep our nonpartisan at-large council races here.
The only difference would be instead of voting for up to 3 or 4 candidates in each race, voters will rank the preferences from 1 to 6. One, however many will be on the ballot. So this University Heights, not a homogeneous community, and to its benefits, it's diverse. But it has communities of interest, racial, ethnic, religious, social, economic, cultural, communities of interest who can easily be underrepresented in council. And this system of government or system of election helps make bodies more representative. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Cromrine. Okay, sure. Mrs. School.
About. Because I don't know about any of you, but it is confusing. At first, here, kind of how it was done. But how the election, Cuyahoga County Board of Elections already knows how to do this. So this is not something that's gonna be super complicated that we're gonna have to sort of figure out. They already know how to do this and can do it very.
Thank you. Right, the Cuyahoga County voting machines are capable of running rankings, voting tabulation. And I believe the same machines are used in Minnesota to run rankings voting. So it's already, yeah. Cuyahoga County is ready to adopt this and implement it. Okay, very good. Does any member of council have a question for Mr. Cromrine? Okay. Would any other member of the commission have anything that they'd like to say on this? We heard from Mrs. Gould already. Anybody else?
Here, I'll, thanks.
Okay, very good.
I would be really proud if we put this to. Oh, my name's David.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah. Fine. But I would be personally really proud if we put this to on the ballot and potentially have the position to be the first in Ohio to be a leader in Ohio in this really great system that really does reveal the candidate with the most support across the entire electorate, not just the most passionate base. And I encourage every member of council to do extensive research on it because I know it's a confusing system to the ear initially, but I think to people that are to voters, it's really just as simple as ranking your top candidates. It's really not a system that I think would be useful. And I think there's a lot of support from people that would help educate the public to potential election on this to really inform them with the system. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Oh, okay, I'll go with Mr. Meyer and then, okay, and then Mr. Curtis. We'll go with Mr. Meyer first. One of the things that.
Well, we should use it for the recordings, if you don't.
One of the other benefits of ranked choice voting is you frequently have the potential to use really nasty elections. Because if you make a bunch of nasty comments about a candidate you don't like, those people that may choose that candidate for their first choice may have chosen you as their second choice. Now they're not going to do that. And so I saw a ad on, I think it was in someplace in New Jersey, where there were 2 people running for a council seat. And the first person said, vote for all my supporters, vote for me first, vote for my candidate second. And then they flipped the script. This is used in other places, like Alaska, San Francisco, Minnesota, other places, Germany, Maine, all across the nation. This is the way to go.
One other quick thing that I'd like to say is it's my understanding this wouldn't be an extra cost to the city since this is already part of the Board of Elections voting systems. Correct? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Riddle. Mr. Farkas, do you have a second?
Yeah, my name is David Farkas. One of the reasons I voted against this proposal. My philosophy throughout this entire process for this proposal as well as others has essentially, not quite that simple, but it can essentially be described as things that aren't broken should be fixed. I enjoy looking for solutions to problems, but if there's no problem, I don't enjoy looking to create a solution when there's no problem that exists. I feel the voting has worked very well for our city for many decades. I don't feel there's anything special to becoming the first like anything in the state of Ohio. I don't think the history shows that that's a good idea. I think that other places that have adopted it are much larger entities, unlike our city, which is a very small city. And frankly, I don't think there's enough history to show that this idea is really such a good idea after all. So for those reasons, and I heard a lot of speculative reasons that it could create, a lot of buzzwords would tossed around to support this, and that it could be a panacea for all sorts of problems that don't exist. I haven't seen any proof of that. So again, from my perspective, it's a solution in search of a problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farkas. There's nothing further from the commission now, silent. We can move on to the next one. Mr. Rowe.
Our next is Mr. Jackson, as my understanding, you're doing recall and initiative. I would recall. Yeah. So you'll, okay, let's see, I'll read you in the middle.
Thank you. The commission is also recommending a proposed amendment changing the process for recall elections. The recall provision in the University Heights Charter is unusual. It's not really a recall election at all. We got some comments from the Board of Election. They said, we understand this language. There is no quote recall language. So what it does instead is it creates a special election in which the officer is placed back on the ballot along with any other qualified candidate who's nominated. So if no other qualified candidate is nominated in this special election, the recalled officer would win by default and retain the seat. And if there's a large field of candidates, the recall officer would be more likely to wait and retain their seat because the other candidate might split the vote. So this proposed amendment is modeled after that National Civic League's Model City Charter provision. We create a recall process that would instead ultimately result in a vacancy of the seat or office of the recall office. So the voters would simply be asked on the ballot, should the officer be recalled, yes or no? And if they are recalled, the seat or office would be filled in the normal process, filling vacant.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cronin. Did Mr. Jackson, do you have something? Oh, okay. All right, do any council members have any questions? And does anybody else on the commission have anything they want to add? Mr. Fitzgerald.
Mr. Mayor, this is one of two vestiges of the village of Idlewood.
Yeah.
From my research, I believe that this provision, this specific recall provision, stems from an archaic Ohio Revised Code plan of government in a statutory city. We're then getting into number 9, proposal number 9, presiding officer meetings, where in statutory villages to this day, statutory villages, the mayor presides over council meetings. That does not happen in any other municipality that I know of in Ohio. That is a city. But the other thing Mr. Cronin just alluded to, I want to make sure we're clear on this one and the next one. There was a defective time frame that the Board of Elections pointed out to us. The time frames in the existing recall provision do not give voters the ability to vote in an absentee manner. It was too close together from the time that it would be certified to the ballot and when the election had to be held. So both in this one and the next one, the timeframes that are set forth in the proposed amendments recommended by the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, so that mail-in and absentee ballots are to be passed by the 11th.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Any further question or comment on this one? I take it, Mr. Jackson, you'll be presenting on the next one?
Yes,
Very good.
this was proposed by Mr. Frontline as well. Sit here.
I'm presenting on this one. So this is an amendment to change the number of signatures required in petitions for initiative or referendum from percentage of registered voters of the city to a percentage of the total ballots cast in the city's last regular municipal election. These provisions are rarely used, if ever, in the city, and the requirements are prohibitively burdensome. So this is another measure intend to provide residents with greater voice in government. And in combination with some of the other proposed amendments, it also makes the charter consistent with having these percentages based on the total ballots cast in the previous election instead of the registered voters. And it makes signatures required not a moving target for people trying to get them, where the total ballots cast static. The number of registered voters could be changed. So that's the reason we proposed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any questions by council members for Mr. Jackson? Any additional commentary from members of the commission? Yes. Oh, Mr. President, yes.
This one is also critical. This was one of the last vestiges of the amount of signatures required was registered voters. A case came out of the Ohio Supreme Court in 1995. It said that it's illegal to do that. And that the Board of Elections can point to this item, there's the reason why. Several different Ohio constitutional provisions. If you're a candidate, or if you're circulating a petition, an initiative or a referendum, if you use the number of registered voters, you don't know what that number is until the day you turn that petition in. Because it changes every day. And that's what the Ohio Supreme Court said. So they read two different sections in the Ohio Constitution and said, no, it needs to be, number has to be established by those voters who voted in the last election, and pick it. Some cities use gubernatorial, some use presidential, some use municipal. In our charter, in most other sections, says the number of voters in the last municipal election, which will make it compliant with Ohio law, as well as, this was the other section, the timeframes have been altered by the commission to comply with the Board of Elections request to make sure that we can get people absentee vote if they want.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cicero. Anything further on this item? Well, then we will move on to the next one, which is proposed charter amendment number 9. Who's presenting?
I think, sorry, this one.
Oh, Mr. Craig.
Thank you. So for proposed amendment number 9, we, as a commission, propose to change the format for how council meetings are conducted, specifically having council run its own meetings instead of the mayor. And at our, just to fill you in our discussions, I think we centered on the theme that council's business is council's business. And we didn't think that it would be appropriate for the mayor, who's the chief executive in a different branch of its government, to be presiding over council's meetings. We think that council as a political branch should be able to run and conduct its own meetings on its own authority. And this proposed amendment reflects that sentiment of the commission. I'm sorry, one more thing to add. With this amendment, we propose that the vice mayor be the person charged with running the council's meetings. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Craig. Any questions by council members for Mr. Craig? And are there any further comments from any member of the commission? Okay, very good. Then we will move on to proposed amendment item number 10. This is Stephen Whitcomb, I'll be handling that. Our item number 10 is an amendment prohibiting discrimination by the city on the basis of a person's membership in certain protected classes or groups. This prohibition is me to say prohibition against discrimination and protections for members of certain classes or groups from discrimination by the city at the local level, in addition to protections provided by state and federal law. And I'm just going to read it. It's a new section in Article 8, Section 12. The city shall not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, age, disability, marital or partnership status, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, genetic information, pregnancy, citizenship status, caste, tribal affiliation, or any other classifications protected by applicable federal, state, or local laws, unless reasonably necessary to normal operations and having a substantial relationship to the job function and responsibilities. Our goal here was looking towards the future. It is interesting as we look through this and as we don't look at America or University Heights as it is now, we have to look at where we are going and the level of diversity that is in our community that we're actually quite proud of. And we felt this was with this amendment, the provisions in it would be protective, at least cover us for, as I said, the next 10 years. Any questions? Are there any questions for Mr. Wertheim? Mrs. Sacks.
Thank you. This is really amazing. It's a much wider spread, to protection of people. What I want to understand, maybe it's a legal question, since we seem to be more protected classes than exist in law, can this stand up in court? If someone were to sue, if they perceive that they were discriminated against because one of the latter mentioned.
As I said at the commission meeting, this does not create a cause of action for monetary gain against the city if the electorate passes the measure.
As I said at the commission meeting, if passed by the electorate, if the council submitted it to the electorate, it does not create some type of a cause of action for monetary damages. There have been other instances in municipal litigation that I and Mr. McConville have been involved in, where something is alleged to run afoul of, say, the city's fair housing ordinance, or something of that note. It may give rise, if there was a law passed by council that ran afoul of this, and somebody alleged it, then it would be declared invalid by it, like a declaratory judgment. But it doesn't give you any extra rights under the federal law. And believe it or not, there is no such thing as any type of lawsuit under the Ohio Civil Rights Act. You can't sue under the Ohio Civil Rights Act. So this is, in my opinion, a statement that does not create any additional cause of action or exposure to the municipality.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sitzman.
One of the things that we wanted to make clear, if you saw the last part of this, we also are saying that this can't prohibit the city from deciding that a basic job description or of the ability to fill a certain job, that they can't, they can. I'm trying to say is that it doesn't stop you. You won't face discrimination charges if what you are doing is this person doesn't fulfill the requirements of the job. That is still up to the city. Are there any other questions?
Any further questions for Mr. Wertheim? Okay, very good.
That represents the totality that, believe it or not, that's 10 or 11 months, depending on how you look at it. I have to tell you, I also wanted to, I didn't say it earlier, was to congratulate the council and the mayor. There were 11 of us. We really, some of us knew each other years ago. And again, I apologize, Jackie, by calling you by your maiden name 30 years ago, but what can I tell you? Jack and I used to work together. But the point was, is that everybody treated each other with respect and dignity. And we had frank discussions. And I have to tell you that I really, really enjoyed this process, as I think most of us did. Are there any other comments anybody wants to make? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. Just to make sure that we're not skipping anything, was there going to be any presentation on the minority report? Or
It was decided, you have it in your packet.
we haven't, as,
Look at it.
very good. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Wertheim, and thank you, members of the Charter Review Commission. Find my agenda. Okay, so the original item B. That concludes the presentation, so we'll go to item C, which is ordinance 2023-22, accepting the final report of the University Heights Charter Review Commission and declaring an emergency. This is an emergency. Who would like to speak on this point?
If I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes, Mr. Sisko, please.
This is more of a formality, in reviewing ordinance 2022-45. This is just that if the council will accept the published final report in its entirety of the Charter Review Commission. The ordinance also specifies in, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how you want me to characterize it. Would it be original, D through M? Or renumbering, relettering?
Yeah, I think maybe just for simplicity in our discussion, we'll just use the original letters going forward. Will that be all right with you, Mrs. Thomas? Okay, so just go ahead and use the original letters, and Mrs. Thomas will understand that these are the original letters that we just happen to have two agenda Bs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the original agenda item 9C, council is free to consider this and pass it so it's on emergency tonight. Original items 9D through M cannot be passed tonight. They're just first reading. The ordinance 2022-45 indicated that once the commission publishes its report, council must choose whether to reject or accept those specific items at its first regularly scheduled council meeting that is outside of 10 days from publication. So this was published last Wednesday. Today is the fourth business day, so it would be at the June 20th meeting for those agenda items. I just wanted to make.
Very good, which will be our next regular council meeting during the month of June. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. I suppose I could use this opportunity now. I could say this at any other point during the next several agenda items. So I'll say it here. There will be time enough between now and November to discuss, with the public, the merits of each proposed amendments. And they are all on first reading this evening. And as Mr. Cicero said, there will be no vote on that this evening. But till then, I will state this. I believe in the work of our Charter Review Commission, the approach that the commission took, the efforts that they made, that you made, because you're here, and the depth of your analysis, the deliberation and discussion. I was present for several of your meetings, not each and every one, but the degree of decorum, the thoughtfulness, the level of deliberation and discussion was unparalleled. In recognition of your work, I believe that all 10 amendments should proceed to the ballot for a yes or no vote for each by the people of this community. That in the end, the people should decide that the strength of the work of this commission calls for that all 10 should go ahead and be on. I thank the members of Charter Review Commission for your hard work and your dedication. You met twice a month for about 11 months, 10 or 11, depending on the count. It was noted that baseball was playing when you started meeting, baseball's playing again now. So you did this without compensation. You did this solely for the betterment of our community, for the future of our. I commend all of you and thank all of you for the time that you took, for the sacrifices you made during this time, and for those of us who lost. Sorry, and for our memory. Is there a motion to adopt on emergency ordinance number 2023-24 to accept the report?
So moved on emergency.
A motion to approve on emergency, Mrs. Willis. Second by Mrs. Marshall. Any discussion on the motion? We will take 2 votes. The first is on suspension of rules. Mrs. Thomas.
Mrs. Sack.
Aye.
Mrs. Marshall. Aye. Wise.
Aye.
Mrs. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Aye. And then on the main motion.
Mrs. Sacks.
Aye.
Mrs. Marshall. Aye. Mrs. Wise.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Aye. Very good. The motion carries. The ordinance is adopted. The report is accepted. Thank you. Next item is item D, ordinance 2023-23, submitting Charter Review Commission proposed amendment number 1 with the charter of the city of University Heights to the electorate of the committee, electorate of the city at the November 7, 2023 general election and declaring an emergency. This is on the first reading. Would anybody care to speak on this item as we hear it on first reading? This is one.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I want to make an overall comment and then I will comment individually on some of these. I also want to just thank all of the Charter Review Committee members. This was an enormous amount of time, personal time that you devoted to the city, and so appreciative of it. I also want to give a special shout out to Mr. Crumrine, because if people don't realize this format of the very complete and clear analysis of each amendment was his doing. It makes a very big difference. I just want to let you know that. And I think, and I also want to thank Mr. Cicero, because when this process first started, we didn't necessarily have a law director, as Mr. Wertheim and I discussed at every meeting, and your skills were invaluable to this whole process. I just have 2 concerns overall, and again, when the certain amendment presents itself, I'll say something more in depth, but I'm very nervous that 10 is too much. I don't want the voters to have voter fatigue. I think many of them are such important issues that I wouldn't want one to fail because they just want to get through voting already, or they might not understand one or look into one because they have 9 other ones that they needed to look into. That's just a concern, and that can be fleshed out when we have our conversation. And then I do have one hard no, and I'll explain myself, but that's not this gender neutrality one, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Swans. Any further comments on this item? Just referencing Mrs. West had to say about Mr. Crumrine's work here. I ditto. And also, I appreciate how much this commission took to heart. Something that I know I raised, I'm sure others did too. That doing this work isn't just a presentation to this council this time, it's a presentation to posterity in this community. We all went back and looked at the work of the previous commissions. And when this report came out, I thought a law review article dropped on my desk. And I just was enthralled with how professional and thorough this was. And at some point, future mayor, future council, future charter review commission could go back and look at this and know exactly what you did and why and what you were thinking of. And know it with clarity. And I thank you all. If there's nothing further on item D, we'll consider the first reading to be had, and we'll move on to item E. Ordinance 2023-22, submitting charter review commission code amendment number 2 to the charter of the city of University to the electorate of the city at the November 7, 2023 meeting. For purposes of the record, amendment number 2 is the one that proposes to eliminate term limits. That is the one we're on now. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say this time? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. So these are just more comments. I think I could persuade either way. Again, just some comments when I thought about this. There is something to be said about new blood and new ideas. 12 years is a long time, and I think Mrs. Sachs might have said this beforehand. You could take a break for 2 years and come back if you wanted to. I just know that incumbents do typically, you know, have a little bit of an edge. And you know, maybe there are some new and fresh ideas that could come out if there were term limits. And again, it's not like you're saying you can never run again, you can run in 2 years. So those are my comments. I'm not steadfast against it at all. I just wanted to, you know, put that out there with my colleagues, hear what they have to say also.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Mr. Rowe.
Okay, I too can be swayed on this. I think as I embark on going door to door and talking to our neighbors and residents throughout the community, and one thing I might hear is the need for the term limits. You know, it wasn't long ago that we made history in this city of having one of the longest serving female mayors, I think, in the country. And it was a great thing to have. It's, you know, record breaking in that sort of respect. But one thing I have heard as I talk to residents was that there was the need at the time for term limits. I believe that's how this ended up becoming a charter amendment. You mentioned back in the 90s. So this one I'm just a little more angst about, and I would have to be convinced otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you. I just want to apologize for speaking out of turn before. I didn't realize that.
No, it's go.
That was it.
All right, so we'll reference back and say. All right, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about this. Oh, I'm sorry. This is fine. Please go.
So the only thing that's concerning me about the no term limit is if we're in a situation in any city where there needs to be a change because it's so bad, it just to me leaves room for that person or whoever's in leadership. If they're not leading, we could be stuck with that. That's the only thing that concerns me about this, but everything else that Dr. Freeman said, I see it and agree with. My only concern is it's a situation of, you know, people want change, but they can't get the change because there's no limit to the time. Because you can, you know, you can keep voting that person in, but eventually there are 12 years to be up at some point, and then we can get new, fresh eyes in, and that's just my concern about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. I'll go ahead and I have a hard time ever believing that Mayor Rothschild's record of 32 years in office will ever be beaten whether this provision passes. I agree with a lot. Well, not a lot. I agree with the good government thinking behind what Dr. Friedman said. I do think that there's something to be said for having more choices, not fewer choices, and if you take the most experienced person off the ballot automatically, there's a sense of that. There is a, that can be fairly characterized as anti-democratic. At the same time, we're a young community overall that has a lot of people that move here and live here for a few years and move on. And I think it's, in addition to those of us who have, stayed for a lifetime, practically. Sometimes we observe that we move here to University Heights and live in 5 years or 50 years. Some of us, a few years in between, but all the same. It doesn't change my plans when it comes to whether or not there's term limits. I will not be the next mayor's for 32 years, I promise you, if there are no term limits. But in a community like ours, I think that having an institutional mechanism for ensuring the fresh blood is added to the system, fresh perspective is added to the system, fresh energy is added to the system, is something that is well suited here at University Heights. And I think reasonable people can come to conclusions on this amendment. I do think it's appropriate to send it to people to decide, but I'm not telling you that I would vote for it if it's on the ballot. But I do think that people should get their opportunity, as I said, with all 10 minutes to weigh in and have yes or no. How's that for taking both sides? Does anybody else have anything like to add on this thing? Well, then we'll consider the first reading had on Charter Amendment number 2 and move on to item F. Ordinance 2023-25, submitting Charter Review Commission proposed amendment number 3 to the Charter of the City of University Heights to the electorate of the city at November 7, 2023 general election and declaring an emergency. This is on emergency. Number 3, as you'll recall, is with regard to the law director appointment. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say about this? Mrs. Wong.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is my hard no. And I know that I did voice this to the Charter Review Commission. There's a lot of reasons why I don't think that this should be on the ballot at all. Number one is many cities have a council appoint the law director. This is not unique to University Heights. We have 7 council members that are independent thinkers that collaborate together, that can come to a decision to appoint the law director versus one mayor. I think that our city especially, and this is so top of mind for me, I think I was the only one that was or actually Mr. Rock was involved in an ARB at this point in the city also, but we had a law director that the city council had to fire because that law director inappropriately ruled for the mayor on an issue. They actually let the mayor vote on something. This did not happen 20 years ago. This happened 10 years ago. It's a very recent issue that happened in our city. I think that the law director works so close with city council, even it could be more than the mayor. He is the legislative arm for us, he is our go-to person. And I think this is so important. I can't stress enough that it needs to stay with, council.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add on this item?
Just a correction, BZA.
I'm sorry,
Or
BZA.
is it?
Mr. Rock, I'm BZA.
Well, I think I need to go ahead and say this for the record here, as I said it also at the Charter Review Commission. I believe this is the most important amendment to put on that. If we put on one amendment, this is the one we need. And the reason why is because the mayor has absolutely no say in who the law director is. None. And the mayor works the law director every day. And the mayor works the law director closely on litigation, on legislation, sure, on contracts, on employment matters, on all matters really before the city, except for those items where the law director proceeds to having either a partner like Mr. Cicero or an outside firm come in to do additional work. The change that's been proposed here by the Charter Review Commission is not that it becomes the mayor's sole appointment, far from it. It's something that the mayor and the council get to do together. Mayor makes a suggestion appointment, the council approves or rejects that appointment, and there is still an ability to remove a law director if needed. And so that said, sometimes there's a saying that is had in the legal profession, tough cases make bad law. And the difficulty of one law director who perhaps gave some bad advice that was led appropriately to that person's separation from the city as the law director. That may have happened regardless under this change. But as it currently stands, if this mayor ever had a problem with the law director, or a future mayor under the current charter ever had a problem with the law director, the mayor is powerless to do anything about it. The mayor is powerless to terminate that law director, because the mayor also doesn't have the power. The person cannot hire their own lawyer either for another opinion if needed. Whereas the city council can, because they have the power. And that is why this is this particular amendment is, in my view, the most important of the 10, and must absolutely go on to the people. And I will be happy to go into further and greater detail about why this is important from now till November. Mrs. Sampson.
Thank you. I heard discussion in the commission that this, having the law director, serve be in this type of position with regard to council and mayor, that it's a positive tension. And I think that's a false notion. That is implied there are biases in legal opinion that are not even handed. I have seen a law director, a law department be even handed and unbiased, accessible not only to council, but to administration, to the residents on behalf of the entire city, and weighing everything out, the pros and cons, describing them in public and also in executive session, which members of the public aren't privy to. So it feels like, I guess to borrow what Mr. Parker said, a solution looking for a problem. And I just do worry about having one person appointing such an important position rather than 7, and working through it that way, and having those checks and balances. So those are.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sachs. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I thought this strikes a good balance between the mayor being able to appoint, council being able to approve that appointment. And if so, need to be removed. Either the mayor could remove the law director, or council by a majority vote could still remove the law director. This proposed amendment, I think it would be worthwhile to send it to the residents of the city of University Heights to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Rowe.
One of my concerns with this amendment is, although it states that the mayor would appoint, council would approve, the removal of the director of law could happen by either the mayor or by the majority of members of the council. So although, we share the law director, we would not share the responsibility in the removal of that director. I have a problem with that because if it takes both the executive branch and the legislative branch to appoint the law director, I feel there should be similar thought in the removal of that. Because we work so closely with the law director, I wouldn't want, this mayor or a future mayor, for whatever reason, could be political, to remove that director and council does not have a say. So that's one reason why I'm hesitant towards this.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mrs. Marshall has not changed since.
Well, that's the question that, have. If the mayor decides that they don't want that law director and they want to remove them because they have a problem with that law director, is that final, or does the council under this proposal, does the council also have to approve? Because that's what my concern. Okay, so then, that's a unilateral decision. So it makes me piggyback and agree with Mr. Rock. I think if we both share the responsibility, if both branches share the responsibility in choosing, both branches to share the responsibility in removing.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Mrs. Wells.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Ms. Martine and Mr. Rock and Ms. Marshall. The section 2, where you have the approval, as you have both, you have appointment with approval. But my concern is the removal piece. That gives me a lot of heartburn. You can have, again, you have 7 council members that have to come to some type of majority for removal, but you have one position of the mayor that if they feel that the law director doesn't rule the way that they want them to rule, they can get rid of them at any time. I don't think that is healthy for our city to have.
Does the city council, do we have does the city council have the ability to suggest that piece is put into the amendment? That if it's balanced
I
with
think,
the other proposed amendment?
I think Mr. Cicero already weighed in on this.
Oh, okay,
Could you go ahead? Mr. Cicero?
If the majority of council objected to that last sentence, the way it's currently phrased, council would be best to reject the proposed amendment. And then council can create another piece of legislation with language that it so deems fit and approves. And there's time to do that, even though there's summer recess, but there's time to do that before it would be due for the November ballot. September, it's due in September, early September.
Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Anything further on this item? We will consider the first reading on item F, amendment number 3, in half. And we move on to item G, ordinance 2023-26. Submitting charter review commission proposal amendment number 4 to the charter of the city of University Heights to be elected the city at the November 7th, 2023 general election and planning emergency. This is on emergency for everyone's recollection. Charter number amendment number 4 is the amendment providing for a decennial charter review commission. Would anybody care to speak on this item?
I would speak and say I agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree that we definitely need to look at the charter every 10 years at the minimum. And I'm agreeing with the commission, that we need, I think it's important to stay with the progress. We want our city to continue to progress, and if we're looking at it every 10 years, it gives us an opportunity to move things, you know, align with whatever is needed at that time.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Mr. Cooney.
I would agree. I think this is a good example of looking at the process, not the person. It's going to require, review to be done at a minimum every 10 years. Once every 10 years. And I think that's what's going to drive, as things that evolve over time. I mean, days are long, years are short, so I think it's a good way to kind of keep everybody on task. To make sure we check in on these items periodically. So I think it's a very good addition.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this also speaks to having the charter reviews every 10 years. Speaks a little bit to the concern of the vice mayor stating she wonders about voter fatigue with 10 different amendments. I'll just come right out here and say that I think that all 10 of these should go on the ballot for voters to consider. But if we were pulling the hood up on the charter every 10 years, perhaps there would be fewer amendments for the voters to consider. We're taking that hard look every 10 years on a regular cadence. I think some of these would have been addressed in the past if we would have been taking a closer look. So I think this is a great idea to regularly look at the chart.
Thank you, Mr. King. Anyone else on council have anything you want to say on that? I'll go ahead. I think it's a fine idea. I think it's a matter of clockwork, it's a matter of routine. It then does away with any idea that any charter review could ever be. Well, makes it a lot less likely that a charter review would be held at a time of political discord just for the purposes of driving a wedge or for other political purposes. If we put it in the charter as a matter of routine that every 10 years, we haven't had a charter review in the meantime, it's time to have one, then it's simply a matter of good government then. And it may be also, like Mr. King said, there will be fewer amendments if we met a little more often, 3 times since 1994. There's nothing further on that. We'll consider the first reading on amendment number 4, which is letter G, to the net. And we move now to letter H, ordinance 2023-27, submitting Charter Review Commission proposed amendment number 5 to the charter of the City of University Heights to the electorate of the city at November 7, 2023 general election and declaring an emergency. So first reading, the amendment number 5, for everyone's reference, is the department name modernization. Is there anything we would like to say about this? Oh, yes, Mr. Rowe.
So I think this is fine. I have no problem with this amendment. If there was something we were to consider where if the council felt 10 amendments was too many, maybe this is one we can probably pick off right now and do later. I have no problem with the amendment, but I can see this being something easily. This is more of a housekeeping item, something we do need to that be. So if we were to narrow down to a smaller number, I'd be okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you. So did I understand correctly, like if we decide we like this, but it just might be too many, we council could move this forward through change the charter through ordinance?
Correct.
That might be a little bit on bill.
Well,
We have to go, yeah, we passed an ordinance to present it to the ballot.
Right.
same way.
So you don't have to wait 10 years.
Right.
No.
And we just did that last year with our civil service commission.
Right. Thank you.
And one more question, if amendment 1 passes where council would have the ability to make some non-substantive changes, would amendment 5's changes
be allowed under that council rate. Since we're just changing the name of the department, it's not gonna change the function. Maybe not as outlined, but
Yeah,
something
I
similar.
mean, I think we want to take those one by one. I mean, changing Department of Law to Law Department, I don't think is substantive. Changing Department of Finance to Finance Department, I don't think is substantive, but others, you can get into some vagaries as to what was intended when legislation was passed, so I think we want to take a look at them one by one.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Anything further on this one? All right. And we'll consider the first reading to be had on item H ordinance 2023-17 amendment number. And then we'll move down to item I, ordinance 2023-28, submitting charter review commission proposed amendment number 6 to the charter of the city of University Heights to the electorate of the city at the November 7, 2023 general election and declaring an emergency. It's an emergency. Everyone's recollection, number 6 is ranked choice voting. Who would like to go first? I feel like somebody has something.
I'll go first. Go ahead, you go first. I'll have to go after you.
Okay.
Question, I realize it's a question, so, I think I recall that there was some discussion about, a problem with undervoting. I think it fell under this category, and if that is correct, I'm not sure this would remedy that. I think people might still only be inclined to vote for someone they know or name they recognize, rather than just someone because they're on the ballot, even if it means putting numbers 1 through 6. They might not want to put any number for 5 and 6, and even 3 or whatever. So if I remember correctly, it wasn't mentioned tonight. But if that was from, I'm not so sure that would remedy it. The other thing is, we had a close election. 4 of us in this last council race were within 0.5%. And what remedied that was to recount the ballots. In fact, we had to do that twice. The second time, we actually went down and watched them recount the ballots, which was a fascinating exercise. That worked very well. And I realize it's a little bit different, but I can really see this. This makes a lot of sense in larger cities. I worry that this may reduce candidates. The candidates are, it makes it too simple from actually walking and knocking on all the doors. And reaching out and really getting to know the voters, the residents, which I found to be just that we have a walkable city. I think it was discussed, it might have been in this or one of the other things that didn't make it to the amendment, but it's walkable, it's affordable, it doesn't cost $20,000 to run. I raised $2,000, and I also couldn't walk and knock on doors in the month of September, more on Friday nights or Saturdays. And so even with that, I was able to make the effort to go out, and I would like to model. I think that's a great model to show how walkable our city is between Independence Day and Election Day. And to have anything that might spoil that, which I perceive this is possibly doing, would be a disservice to our city. So I'm not saying that I do think that ranked voting is important. I'm just not sure it's apples and apples to the city of our side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sachs. Who'd like to go next? Mr. Rowe.
Okay, and I had similar thoughts. I actually, as a concept, the ranked voting, I really like it as a concept. follow what happened in the last Senate race. I thought that was very interesting, giving people that ability. But that was a statewide election. So, you know, everybody had the same rules across the whole state. The only concern I have is that we did, I believe, the first city in Ohio to do this. Or at least currently. As much as I want to be the leader in this, it's just one thing I want to maybe take a step back and think about this a little bit more, you know, it's something that the city of Cleveland or Columbus or Cincinnati can do for a large city to work out some of those kinks. And I just worry about the, you know, overall confusion it could have on the voter itself. You know, if a voter has never done this before, and we only have, I think, what, 9,000 registered voters, there'd be very few people to talk to try to figure that out. You know, if my next door neighbor was unsure how the rank voting works, you know, there's very few people to talk to about that. I think with these, so I like the idea. I want to maybe put this on the shelf for us a little bit and see if the city picks this up. I'd love to see it statewide, and then we could go in on that. But I think I want to hold it this
Fine. Okay, Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. I've heard that the Board of Elections is eager to take this on. They have the capability to do it today. And us as a city would not have to administer that process. We would have to explain to voters how it works, but you know, that's just communicating with voters that we do where we go talking to people, asking them for. Regard to walking the city, I think that ranked choice encourages you to walk even more of the city, get talking to everyone you can. Because every vote matters. You can't just talk to your constituency. You need the vote, you need to go. And I think it encourages a greater level of democracy and encourages people to vote for people that they believe in more, to give them a chance. And I would really like to see us be a leader in the state and the country by taking on ranked choice voting.
Mr. King.
One thing I forgot to mention, so this came about, I believe, as a response to the need for candidates to have at least 50% of the vote to get a position as either mayor or on council, and I do support that. The other options at the time were, you know, whether it be a primary or a runoff election. So this does do good in that it's one election, so I understand that. Outside of my comments I said earlier, you know, I'm glad the commission came up with something to solve need for at least having a 50% vote. So.
If I may, I have a few things that, oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Marshall, you said.
So I was just gonna say that I agree that I think it will work better for a larger city. And I think it can possibly be confusing. However, I do like the fact that the board already knows how to do this. That was a concern for me that is no longer a concern to me. And I like the fact, like, I think it's a huge plus that it'll eliminate the runoff of that. I just think like with the little, the confusing part for the voters. I mean, once it's on the ballot, they'll speak, I think they will speak fine, as much knowledge as possible to try to understand it. Because it was extremely confusing to me initially. But, yeah, so I have some concerns, but I do, like I said, like the fact that the board is here, so that's a huge concern that we don't have to worry about. And then it eliminates the.
Yeah, take a turn here. I want to start with the council side. because I think that's the more complicated seeming one. The way it's counted, I think, is the complicated, the part that's harder to understand. But the good news is that's not the part the voters really need to fully grasp in order to participate in the system of that type. Now I'm a Gen X. I grew up on David Lever. He had a top 10 list in every show. And he would go over the top 10, whatever. And, you know, interestingly, his number one wasn't necessarily the number one, but bear with me. We've all seen clickbait, you know, the best burger in every state. We could have in the University Heights what the top 6 pizzerias are, and I bet you each have an opinion. I bet, you know, you would be able to say, yeah, you know, maybe you should say the Jerry's is number 1, the Pizzazz is number 2, the Primo's is number 3, the Rascal House is number 4. The Whole Foods has a pizza and it's number 5, and then you go with Teresa's for number 6. And that's how easy it is to vote for city council with ranked choice vote. You rank your 6. The thing that came up was, you know, what if, for example, in the last election, I really liked Brian Key, but I didn't know about any of the other folks, but I want to make sure Brian got in there. Under our current system, somebody might just vote for Brian, and then you'd have the undervote of the other 2 votes. They wouldn't have voted for Chris, for Sherry, or for Wynn, or for any of the other people that were on the ballot that year. But now, if Brian's your number 1 choice, you rank him number 1. And then you look at 2 through 5. And you know that you gave your top vote to Brian. If that's how you felt about Brian. And it discourages the undervote. It encourages you to go ahead and rank your 6 favorite pizzas or city council. The harder part is in the tabulation, which the Board of Elections will take care of. But if people get the idea that, you know, even when you're voting for 3 right now, yeah, it's probably one you like better than the other 2. I don't know, you know, or if not, well, now you actually have to sit down and decide, but that's a lot easier, I think. And you get to vote for up to 6 instead of just 3. And that reduces some of the closer votes. You could have said, I like this one, I like that one. I only get 3 votes. Who do I put in for the 3rd? Well, you get to rank 6. So I think that ends up being a lot simpler in execution once we actually introduce, you know, how that works. You rank up to 6 candidates. And the top 3 or top 4, depending on the election. Turning them then over to the mayor's race. I think there is a certain amount of satisfaction that can be had that your mayor won by a majority vote, however you get to that. We had 4 people run last time. I won, but I did not have a majority. I had 48.26%. And I had more votes than I had at the previous election. But more people turned out the second time. And I won by a much larger margin this time. But the first time I had a majority. And this isn't all about me, of course. These things can be remedied a number of different ways. One, you can leave it as it is, first past the post, and it offers an incredible incumbent advantage. Great if you're the incumbent, not so good if you're anyone else. Or you can have a runoff. Or you can have a primary. Runoffs and primaries cost more money. Having that additional election costs more money. It costs more money for the city to hold that election. It costs more money for the candidates to campaign for that additional election, which means you have to raise more. Or with ranked choice voting, you rank your mayoral candidates. Who do you like first? Who do you like second? Who do you like third? Last election, who do you like fourth? And do you get to vote for up to 4?
What?
I don't want to misrepresent it. Well, 6 for council. But yeah, it just says highest ranking. I don't know if there is a limit. Well, point being, if you don't have 50% on the first round, and the bottom candidate drops out, and those votes are redistributed. So, you know, we'll go ahead and use the real life example. We had 4 candidates in the last election: Brennan, Langfeld, Atkin, Simmons, in that order. That was the order of finish. So when Brennan didn't get 50% of the vote, Simmons, who took 4th place, he would drop off, and then whoever was ranked as the second choice, the next choice for all the Simmons voters, they would then be reassigned. If somebody has a majority at that point, great, we have a winner. If not, then number 3 was active. And then whoever was the next choice on the acting voters, they would be distributed between Brennan and Blankfeld. And then whoever won. And the good news there is that whoever won, and we'll never know who that would have been in that instance, because we only all voted once. Would have had, a majority of the community behind. And I think that's a worthy thing, whichever way it would have turned out, that, people would feel and have the confidence that the mayor's mandate to go ahead and proceed with their agenda that they ran on and were elected. So I think we should do it. John, okay, Mr. Rob.
So that makes sense on the mayor's race, because that's one race in which multiple people can run. In a council race, so this is where it gets a little more convoluted. It's either gonna be 3 people running, 3 seats open or 4 seats open. And let's just, for argument's sake, say there's 2 people running. I think when I go to the polls to vote for a council seat, I'm voting not just who are my top 4 or my top 6. Honestly, when I'm doing the council race, those are 4 open seats. So those 4 people are my number 1s. And I think that's where this gets a little more convoluted, because you're doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Instead of doing 4 number 1s and 4 number 2s. If they were individual races, if I was just running against, other people for this particular seat instead of being top 4 vote getters, that would be different. And then I'd understand, because then the person with 50% would win. I don't know how that works in this. I guess you'd have to explain how that would work in the council. So you just ranking your people, or are you ranking it by seat? Because again, there's either gonna be 4 seats or 3 seats, depending on the year.
It's just a.
Does that make sense?
No, I understand what you're asking, if I may answer, and if anybody, if I'm a statement under the commissioner. Right. You just rank the top 6, whether there's 3 seats or 4, you rank the top 6. So if there's only 3 up this year, you rank the top 6 and then the top 3 get it. And if there's 4 seats up, you rank the top 6 and the top 4.
Yeah, so I get it, I guess, they're different seats, so that's where I'm having a little bit of difficulty, because again, I'm voting top 4 people as number 1 for the seat.
No, but you're only voting 1 through 6.
We changed the game,
Well,
so we changed the whole dynamic.
I mean, right now it says, vote for not more than 3 or vote for not more than 4, and the entire list is right. So instead of just darkening 3 circles or 4 circles, you're gonna rank them 1 through 6. Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you. So I'm listening to all of this and making good points, making some really good points. Like I started out by saying, the rank voting is of interest to see the value. Perhaps instead of, I wonder if this would be appropriate. Instead of having rank voting for all of our elected officials, why don't we start with rank voting for the mayor position? It's one position, it's straightforward, there would be a mandate. And then we'd see how it goes. Council is a little more confusing. Do you actually write the numbers in, or are the numbers there? Could the numbers be misunderstood if you're writing them in? I don't know. I would hope they'd be printed. I mean, under each person, but I guess that would require voting the snow and then reworking it. But that could be a step in being, the first ones to do something like this with a more, an easier to understand start to this process. So it's just about a council to think about.
Thank you, Mrs. Sachs. Mrs. Marshall.
So now I'm trying to make sure that I have the right understanding. So there's 4 seats for city council. There may be 3 people running for 1 seat, 3 people running for the other seat. Okay, okay. I wanted to make sure I understood. So everybody who's running for council at large, all of of the names will be on the list.
That's how it is
And
now.
then we'll just rank it and whoever gets the seat at the end of okay, I get it. I wanna make sure I understood that right the first time, okay, I get it.
But the only difference now is when you go to the polls now, you pick the top person. 4 seats, so you might have 4 number ones. Does that make sense? Whereas in a ranked voting for a council seat. If you still have your 4 number ones, you can only do 1, 2, 3, 4, your number 4 might not even make it. Even though they were probably your top choice, because you're filling 4 different seats, so. It's a little more common. Does that make sense? When you go to the polls now, you have 4 seats, and you have, let's say, 8 people running. You have your top 4 as number ones, okay, and maybe in the back of your head, you say, well, I don't like this guy. Or whatever, but you're voting your number 1 for 4 different seats. Okay, in the ranked voting, if those same candidates were running. And you want to see those 4, you can only do 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't go 1, 1, 1, 1, 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's, yeah, that's true. But also though, if there's 6 or more people running and there's 3 seats. And there's one person you really, really like. And the others, some you like, okay, but you don't feel strongly about, but there's one you really, really like, then what the thing you do to advantage that person is you vote for only them, and you don't vote for it. Some people do that.
There's run.
And that's where you get this big undervote. You get people, I mean, if somebody's running for city council and they're kind of going in alone, they're gonna tell, they might tell their friends. I'm not saying any of you did this, but I'm just saying this is one strategy. You might say, just vote for me. Because every time you vote for somebody else, then you're kind of moving them up along with me and I could accidentally fall out. Yeah, right. So if you rank them, then the person that maybe you would like to see the most on is the person you rank as number 1, and then you go on down from there. And you're not discouraged from filling out the ballot and ranking your choices. I mentioned the 6 pizzerias. I think I ranked Teresa's 6. I'm not really picking on Teresa's. I'm just saying if 5 other pizzas are in town, you probably aren't going to order Teresa's. I know, sorry, Teresa's Pizza. I love you, Teresa's Pizza. I love all operating members of guys' businesses, but I'm just saying that they might not get darkened, their circle darkened at all, but at least I would rank them number 6. And if everybody else likes Teresa's Pizza because they have great coupons, well then, you're gonna put them number 1. And they might get their spot. Okay. This is sense.
Okay, so I'm wondering if this could lead to a different type of undervoting. So personally, the way I've been voting is if I know somebody and I prefer them, I'm gonna vote for them. If I don't know them at all, because for whatever reason, I just don't know them, I'm not voting for them at all. I'm an undervoter, I guess. I'm just not gonna throw my vote on someone that, oops, they totally don't represent what I think, and for whatever reason, I couldn't research 6 people, okay, because some people wait till the last minute or whatever, and I'm out of town, or, all kinds of perfect storm scenarios. So could this fall to something like, there's 3 kind of categories. There's someone a voter likes and prefers as their primary vote, 1 or whatever. Then there's people they don't know, and then there's people they don't like. But they put a 1 blank blank 5 6, 4 5, whatever. Could it lead to a different type of undervoting to kind of undermine the election? I just wonder. I just wonder. So it just seems a little confusing in our small place on Earth. Where we could just get out and meet people, make it know us and vice versa. But I more and more I think about it, I think it might be just a good start for the mayor's position. Because it's straightforward, it's 1 seat. You've got as many people, you know, running for one seat rather than many people running for several seats. It's just, it might get lost on people and you still might get undervoted, but in a different, interesting way.
Yet another way, maybe, is because we are some. There's an opportunity to get to meet every candidate.
Yes, I know.
And if you meet every candidate, you know, you might find that you don't have enough votes to support all the people you actually like. In the end, only 3 or only 4 are gonna win, but maybe you actually like 6 people. So you can go ahead and rank them, and then you've thrown a little bit of support to all. Because you've had those interactions, you've met with them, you like what they bring. And they're worthy of one of your 6 votes, even though only 3 or only 4.
I guess the point is, we're assuming a lot about voter behavior. You know, based upon our own experience or where we come from. So, you know, to assume that just because we put 6 names on, you can vote 1 through 6, people are going to do that. They have a choice now to vote for who they want. People have a choice to run, you know, so, I think that's my point.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, man. I think we're getting hung up on the voting for one position versus 3 or 4 in council races. It's the same thing. The only thing that changes, you're still ranking your candidates, your preference for candidates. The only thing that's changing is the threshold that you win. I'm not very good at math, so certain areas, but you know, it would be lower than 50% for council races. You would just, once candidate hits that threshold number, candidate drops on, votes are reallocated again. Until you have your seat still. It's the same thing. It's just there's more people who are eventually elected to office. I think it would be more confusing to have 2 different systems, to have first past the post for council elections and ranked choice for mayoral elections. I think it would provide a certain level of consistency to have ranked choice across the board if we were to adopt it in the city of University Heights, which I previously stated I would be in favor of that happening and putting that to a vote of residents of the city to consider.
Okay, well, we spent, I think, a good amount of time exploring the different possibilities here. And I know there's still quite a few things we need to get through this evening, so I'm sure this won't be the last word on it. This is only on first reading. I appreciate that Kyle was here to cheer us on and work on commission here. So if there's no objection, I think I'm going to say that the first reading here has been had, and I look forward to more robust discussion. And yeah, and when I said I'd like to see all 10 voting people, well, I'd like to see this one go too. So I'd love to have this exchange with all the residents on their doorsteps. It's like an option. Which then takes us to item J, ordinance 2023-29, city charter review commission proposed amendment number 7 to the charter of the city of University Heights to be elected to the city at the November 7, 2023 general election, declaring an emergency. This is first reading. And just as a reminder, J number 7 is recall elections. Mrs. Wong.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think we just have to keep in mind with the recall of the initiative referendum that currently the way that our charter is written, there is no way that early voting can happen properly. So I'm not sure how much of a choice we really have now. I think we're going to abide by this.
Can you elaborate on that?
think Mr. Cicero.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Right.
Oh, okay, I thought you were saying something else.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, I think, and I would agree with Mrs. Weiss that, you know, for J and for K, that, you know, going to the community and saying, hey, our charter is currently illegal on this point, so let's fix it. And do something that's legal. And, you know, the other thing I would say on both of these, recall and initiative referendum, is it doesn't make them easy, but it makes them possible. And possible is appropriate. Herculean is better than gorgeous. Would anybody like to say anything else further on this thing? Okay. And we'll consider the first reading had on that one. Amendment number 7, which is 2023-29J. Now we'll go to item K, ordinance 2023-30, submitting charter review commission proposed amendment number 8 to the charter of the city of University Heights to the elect of the city. At November 7, 2023 general election, declaring emergency, this is an emergency, and for everyone's recollection, amendment number 8 is the initiative and referendum. And I think we can just kind of incorporate the same words we all have, because anyone else they would like to say. Mr. Rowe.
I was hoping maybe Mr. Cicero can give us the number rundown. I was at that meeting when you were saying at the last election, this many people voted, so this is how many we need for initiative, for who are we, this is for referendum and initiative. So based on the last election, how many signatures would you need in the existing charter versus what's proposed?
If you look at the page 7 at the beginning of the overall report, there's a table there. So the 10%, like for an initiative, need 335 votes, 335 signatures. 15% 502, 20% 669. And if you contrast that with what the charter had said, for example, at 20%, you need less than almost a third. It's almost a third less votes.
Okay, so wait a minute. So for referendum, I'm sorry, for initiative.
So if you want to go through the specific language.
Yeah.
For a referendum, excuse me, for an initiative, you need 10% minimum. If you get 20, then there's excuse me, 25, then there is a special election. So in other words, if you get 10%, it goes to the next regular election. And then if you get 25%, there's a special election that the city would have to pay for. That's on an initiative, and that's on page 42 of the post. 42 of the charter that's attached to the post. Then when you go to referendum, which is on page 43, 20% gets you on the ballot. However, 25 gets you a special election, an expedited election. You see that at the top of page 43?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you need 669 people to get an initiative or a referendum on the next regular election. However, if you get basically, what is that, 170 more? You get 170 more signatures, 836, you get to force a expedited special election. And that's markedly different than the 1,780 and 2,225 that you need under the existing charter.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Floor is open. There are no further comments. We'll consider the first reading and on that item. Next is item L, ordinance 2023-31, submitting the charter review commission proposed amendment number 9 to the charter of the city of University Heights to the elect of the city at the November 7, 2023 general election declaring emergency. This is on first reading. Number 9 is presiding officer at council meetings. Anyone like to say a word on We can always talk about another time.
Thank you. So the only, negative worry I have is that this would cause more distance between administration and council. That's, I prefer to work collaboratively and cohesively. That's not always the case. And whatever we can do to foster that would be my preference. It makes sense that council meetings and the mayor participate, in report and such, but, again, I think that's pretty clear what my concern is.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sykes. Anybody else? Mr. Coon.
My question is the, section 4, B. Where the, which is on page 4, article 5, section 4. The, on page 47. The legislative, the mayor, what's being removed is the mayor shall preside all meetings of the council. Shall have the power to veto specified in Article 3, Section 7 of the charter. Will the mayor have any power of veto? It's already set forth in Article 3, Section 7.
Yeah, it's just redundant.
Article 3, Section 7 was not revoked. It's redundant. Correct.
Yes,
Actually, that you bring up a good point. So when a voter goes to see a proposed amendment, let's just say for 9, whatever we're gonna call it, will they get the cross out here? Or would the voter get confused that we're removing a veto power? How are we to tell the voter at the polls that it's redundant?
You're presupposing the voter is going to actually read the text of substance of a charter amendment, which some do, and we've all seen them in the state, even in the county. We would work with the Board of Elections to make it as clear as possible, or we have input, but initially, they get the strike through language to make it very simple.
So that would be on the ballot, strike through language?
It would be underneath, and it's in real fine print, if you've ever recall seeing the charter amendment, the actual language. There's usually a title. Like, do you propose to have the vice mayor become presiding house meetings? And that's all it would say.
And I think the reason I'm asking that, because Mr. Coon brought up a good point, if this could get voted down, because someone might say, I don't want the mayor to lose the veto power. Without seeing the rest of the text that's redundant, how would the voter know it's redundant?
He or she would have to do research, and I've also seen gender neutrality charter division amendments get voted down. I've also seen housekeeping charter amendments that have been proposed voted down in other communities. It depends upon the depth and scope of interest of each voter as to whether or not they want to read this the title or they want to read the text. There's no way in this, I would submit, and again, we would work with the Board of Elections, but to have some other section that's completely unaffected in here might even be more confusing.
I agree. So I guess you said the short sentence, is that what we're seeing here is a brief description? That's what the voter would see as the short description?
No, we would craft that with the Board of Elections. the
Okay,
exact
so I
language.
guess would you be able to craft it so that it's understood that the sole purpose of this is to give the vice mayor the ability to preside? Okay.
Yeah, I think with respect to any of these ordinances that you pass, we'll be working with the Board of Elections to craft language that goes on the ballot. And I suspect we will be able to have the Board of Elections include a statement, explanation with respect to that item that said something along the lines of this is not eliminated the mayor right of veto set forth in the charter section. It is a matter of state law that the charter itself and then all of the proposed amendments be available at the site for anyone who wants to review them. So if someone wants to sit in the corner and read for a couple of hours, they're entitled to do that under state law.
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly and before we move on, that I did speak at the Charter Review Commission in favor of this petition, so I don't want anybody in here thinking that this is some sort of conspiracy against the mayor. It's not. You know, the mayor would love to see, at least this mayor would see the city council on some meetings. I think that would be appropriate and certainly a more commonplace setup to have the presiding officer be a member of the council. And it's done in most of our other communities. Here, it's a more unique feature that the mayor would do it. I won't tell you it's not fun sometimes. Just tell you, I'd be okay with moving on from it when somebody else. So. Anything else on the side? All right. Then we will consider the first reading on item L to have been had. And we then move on to item M, which is ordinance 2023-32, submitting Charter Review Commission proposed amendment number 10 charter of the City of University Heights to enter the city at the November 7, 2023 general election, declaring an emergency. This is on emergency. This is the anti-discrimination provision. Okay, Mr. Wareham went over it quite well. Any comment on this? I will call those comments then. Respectfully suggest that our first reading is going to have. Yes.
It's a little out of place. It's a little out of place. It's more on everything else, but I wanted to ask with Mr. Cicero here, he's worked so closely with the board. We're going to be voting on each of these items next at our next council meeting on June 20th. And those will also be voted on emergency. No.
They don't have to be, because that'll be second reading and you can pass them under normal.
Well, remember, there's a difference between suspension of the reading rules on the one hand, which you will not have to do at your next meeting because you will be having your second meeting. Charter only calls for 2 meetings. Versus emergency on the other, and any ordinance passed on emergency, whether it's on a first reading or second reading, becomes effective immediately upon its passage.
So would we need these to become effective immediately in order to get onto, in time to get onto the ballot? I guess what I'm trying to get at is how many votes do we need to get these onto the ballot?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, these aren't due.
I don't think we need to pass any of these on emergency to get them on the ballot.
The board doesn't need them until September.
Right.
So you had time to not pass them on emergencies based on that you need 4 votes.
I really appreciate that, that clarification, especially since we're down a number right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on this agenda item before we move on? Well, I'll just say this. I thank the Charter Review Commission. I didn't thank Mr. Cicero or Mr. Aiken. So thank you both for all the work you've done here. And thank you to everyone here for getting through this, and I think a very productive plan. A lot of good discussion here this evening on this item and forward to the next meeting. Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is item N. Motion approving the signal service company contract renewal for citywide traffic signal monitoring services in amount not to exceed $3,102 plus maintenance services at a rate of $70 an hour. Chief Ramos, you have the floor. We could track down the microphone for the chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Signal Service Company is providing comprehensive signal maintenance and monitoring services for the city since 2021. And for any type of service, prior to that, that was technical in nature or required replacement. Signal Service has provided that solution as well for many decades for the city. So at this time, this proposal is just intended to renew the annual agreement that we have in place with Signal Service. Regarding the related to Jim first memo that was shared with council, this memo content was specifically discussed earlier this evening at safety committee. The committee made a recommendation then for council to consider this agenda item. So subsequently, I respect the request for council to authorize the city to renew the annual agreement with Signal Service Company to provide comprehensive traffic signal monitoring and maintenance to the city and public.
Okay, very good, and thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Rogers? Mrs. Jones.
Question, just a comment. This
Very good.
was referred from the safety committee. Everyone's agreed. We should go forward.
Very good. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, a motion to approve by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second? Second. I'll take the second from Mr. King. Any further discussion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Sad. Aye. Ms. Marshall. Aye. Ms. White.
Aye.
Ms. Scott.
Aye.
Ms. Liddy.
Aye.
A very good motion, carries. Thank you. Next is item O, motion approving the bid for the 2023 street road improvement program from CA Agresta as the lowest and best bid in the amount of $764,700 and entering into a contract with the same. Mr. Chin.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We accepted bids last Friday and we did get 3 bids on the road program for this year. The low bid was turned in by CA Agresta Construction Company. They recently successfully completed the Philly Saybrook Washington intersection improvement for the bioswale. They're a reputable contractor. Engineer's estimate on this was $780,000 and their low bid was $764,700. So I'm recommending the low bid is the lowest and best bid.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chin. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shooting. So we actually added a fifth intersection because when we spoke before, we only had 4 roads, correct?
We had 4 roads, but the intersection improvements at Miramar and Milford
So
is, we don't have a ADA accessible crossing there. We have to have. We got a complaint from somebody in a wheelchair that said they don't have.
I didn't know examples that intersection.
That's number 5.
Great, thank you.
I estimated at 30,000. I hadn't even designed it yet. I didn't know what it came in at 30.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Not as there, oh, Mr. Cannon.
You know, just so everyone knows, this will require a budget modification. And that can be done. I'm gonna do a mid-year amendment. Cover everything that's happened today. We also have $166,000 left of ARPA funding. It could be dedicated to this project, so difference between the original budget, the additional ARPA funds, and the bid results is very minimal, but we want to make that adjustment. So
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Is there a motion to approve?
So
A motion to approve bid by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Sacks. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks. Aye. Mrs. Marshall. Aye. Mrs. White.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye. Aye. Very good motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chin. Next is item P, motion approving a budget modification for the Washington Silsbee Saybrook intersection community cost share project. Mr. Kennedy.
yes, Mayor, this project is being funded by community dollars from the sewer district. It was originally approved by council at a level of approximately $297,000. Because of changes in the project and the ability for sewer district to give us a higher allocation. The amount of that contract is now estimated to be $340,000. But for auditors, so I wanted to make sure that council authorized that additional funding. We have to spend the money first and they get reimbursed. And right now, according to my records, we're only authorized up to the $297,000 amount. And I believe a memo went out today, Mr. Chairman, with more detail on it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions or discussion? Is there a motion? Okay, motion by Mr. Cooney. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Brock. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sack. Aye. Mrs. Marshall. Aye. Mrs. Frye. Aye. Mrs. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Very good, motion carries. Thank you. Next is letter Q, resolution 2023-33, alternate to next budget for 2024. This is on first reading, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an annual requirement according to state law. We have to prepare this budget, which projects our revenues and expenses for the subsequent year. Once that is approved, we send that into the county budget commission, who conducts an analysis basically to justify our request to assess property taxes. I sent this version down to the county for them to take a preliminary look at. They're okay with it. Again, it's a statutory requirement. It doesn't need to be passed on emergency, but it's a resolution that needs to be filed by, I believe, July 20th. So I want to get on first reading tonight, so we can pass.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
And there's no change.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, clear. There are no questions. This was on first reading. I'll suggest for the record that the first reading has been had. And we will move on then to, thank you, Mr. Kennedy, to letter R, resolution 2023-15, calling upon the state of Ohio to ban the AR-15 and AR-15 style semi-automatic weapons, among other common sense gun safety reforms. I'll go ahead. I sponsored this. I drafted the original resolution, made some changes following a, based upon the discussion that we had at safety, what's a safety? Yeah, we had a special safety committee meeting on this subject. There was some opposition or heartburn, certainly discussion over the issue regarding raising the issue of home rule. That's certainly a subject that we can certainly talk about any other time as well. There were plenty of other issues here that we all agreed on, so we put together, we amended the list slightly to include the things I think the committee generally agreed on, and we brought it back. And here we are. You can still feel the same. I would request a motion to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Sachs. Oh, we can go either way. Mrs. Sachs, go ahead. Well, there was a motion on the floor. We can do. Oh, wait, okay. Sorry. Yeah, because if we can go either way, we can put it on the floor and then have a discussion. Okay, so we'll say that there's a motion to adopt the resolution by Mrs. Marshall. Okay, very good. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. King. And then we'll have discussion on the motion. Mrs. Sachs, did you?
Thank you. I first want to thank you, Mayor, for making the adjustment to this resolution, this important resolution. And also for providing that article to read to make your point. I appreciate that information. There are a couple of parts in here which I'm still thinking I would still want to see change, so I'm not sure how to do that. Do I talk about that now? Do I suggest that, or I can vote a certain way and then we change it? Like how does it work?
Well, you can ask the party who moved And the party who seconded to consider an amendment. Consider and decide what to do.
Okay. It's interesting. So there are 4 parts. The first one is in the the resolution, resolution calling upon the state of Ohio to ban the AR-15 and AR-15 style semi-automatic weapons. I think that's it. Among other common sense gun safety reforms doesn't make sense to me. If we want to do additional legislation, I think we do. I think I want to be as focused as possible on what we are trying to accomplish here. Okay, that would be my first recommendation. The second thing is more a question. The second to last whereas, where it says our parks are not safer as a result. I would ask what evidence there is. Did something happen? Has been violence? Is there some reason to say that our parks are not safer as a result? I'm not sure what that's based on, that statement.
I've had multiple complaints from people at the park about individuals carrying guns in the park and they don't feel safe.
Okay, thank you. And in section 1, just A through I would like to strike I. Again, the common sense legislation, it doesn't mean anything. I think and it says that as it pertains to firearms, this is not exhaustive. I want to stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish here, which is to abolish the not allow the automatic weapons. And finally, in section 2, it says, in the last line, the right to live in society, go to school, church, synagogue, or mosque. I would rather just see a house of worship, because we might have people who practice all kinds of things that we don't even know. And to the point of the anti-discrimination piece in regard to just like the last piece, it could be just about anyone who's at some point, we have a house Jain or Sikh or Hindu or whatever. So I think to keep that, so we don't offend anyone, as you can see, I'm more for inclusion in that regard. So those are my 4 points for the motioner to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sachs. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that we need to keep the other common sense gun safety reforms in the title. Mainly in section 1, item B through I are those other common sense safety things that we are recommending that the assembly consider. I is just stating that this isn't exhaustive. It's like, do something. We've only seen restrictions on gun sales, concealed carry permits. We've only seen those things roll back, and it's become easier and easier to get a firearm. So I think that we need to keep that title in place, and you need to keep all of these sections, all these items A through I under section 1. Regarding section 2, I agree with you. I think that house of worship would be a more inclusive term to use, and I would be in favor of section 2 to replace the individual house of worship with something else.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mrs. Sachs.
So thank you. That now that the resolution title makes more sense to me, because I do agree with A through H. However, I don't agree with, because I think we can still do another. We can pass ordinances now. We can research this more and see what else. But to just leave it open-ended, perhaps that's the part I have the issue with, not necessarily in the title, but in general. So I would say that I is just a little too, it just takes away from the health of this very serious thing with some ways to support this type of recommendation to control what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. I do feel like I should clarify, we cannot pass ordinances. We can pass a resolution, any ordinance we pass, we are running into the preemption problem, so. That's why this is
Okay, I understand.
a resolution.
Okay.
I mean, nobody's asking that the city be. Nobody here is taking the position that we're trying to pass an ordinance and seek a court check. Okay, Mrs. Wells.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the special safety committee meeting that we had was very collaborative. I think it was
Yeah.
unique. That this was even sent to committee and that this council all agreed that something statewide should be done, which is not typically what this council does. We did robustly discuss this. When I think about now, I do see what you're saying. Because we are concentrating on the semi-automatic weapons.
Yeah.
And this is much more broad. I'm not sure why we didn't discuss it during the meeting. I mean, that's why it's always good to have, you know, this discussion now. I tend to agree with you with that piece. I think it's a great document. I think that this is something we should be proud of as a city council. But I would entertain the notion to pull out and to also change house of worship in more global terms as opposed to specifically, you know, talking about church, synagogue, etc.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McConville, when it comes to amending section 2, where it says to go to church or synagogue or mosque and simply changing it to a house of worship. Is that something that, do we make a motion or to
Yeah.
amend?
You're gonna need to amend my motion, but I think before you do that, you would need the first and the second withdrawn. So you can amend and then move again.
Okay.
Because you moved to adopt without amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you have to do that. I mean, the motion to amend would simply take precedence to the motion to adopt. Do we have to?
If they both agree, I suppose you could do it that way. They both agree on what the amendments are.
I don't know which to make this over.
On the clarification, we would be voting on the amendment separately.
Oh, yes. Yes, I think we would have to do that first. Because what I would want to start out with is entertain a motion to change the section 2 language to go to church or synagogue or mosque to simply to a house of worship. And if there's,
And see, that's why I think you need to withdraw your motions, because if you're gonna have a roll call vote on the amendments,
okay,
we don't know yet what the ordinance is gonna say.
that's true. That's true. Well, you know, if that's how you prefer it, Mrs. Martin, would you agree to withdraw your motion to adopt this time so that we can work on amending? Okay, we have,
Now, I will agree to remove myself.
okay, so with that motion withdrawn, is there a motion to amend section 2 to strike the language to go to church or synagogue or mosque and replace it with to go to a house of worship?
Also,
I will second there.
Motion by Mrs. Sacks, seconded by Mr. King. Any discussion on that? Oh, Mrs. Wong.
place of worship versus house of worship, better.
Oh, yeah, I said house, but yes.
Yes.
It is.
Right? Right.
Do we need to remove the first and second?
Friendly, it's the movement on our second degree, that's place. of worship. Yes, perfect. Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Okay, let's call roll.
Hi.
Sorry, that's all right.
Mrs. White. Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Sound like you told me the voters. All right. Okay, motion carries and section 2 is so amended.
No. So then. Can we make another motion?
Sure.
To amend,
Yes, I think you may.
right, to strike, letter I.
Okay, so there's a motion to strike letter I by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
That's section one.
Section 1 letter. Yes. I think it's in, but yes,
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
second by Mrs. Sacks. Any discussion on this amendment, Mr. King?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate that I think what is trying to say is that this isn't inclusive of everything we have recommended in A through H. These are what we're suggesting are our answers. But maybe there's something else. We don't know. We don't know. Does anyone know how to solve the problem we have with assault weapons and excessive firearms in our society? I think that it's just saying do something. That what we've suggested is not inclusive. So I think that it's important that we leave I in place, so that we're not just asking for these specific items. I think that it isn't overly broad. I think it's saying that we want to have something done about firearms control and limiting the availability of assault weapons within our society.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. Yeah. Okay, Mrs. Weiss first.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, Mr. King. I do think even in the title, it says among other comments on safety reforms, that kind of shows that it's not, all inclusive. I do see what Mrs. Sax's point is. I don't think by retracting I, it takes away from the entire thing, because even the title is among other. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Mrs. Sacks.
Thank you, and thank you again. I appreciate the dialogue, I really do. But if you'll recall back to one of my comments when this was first introduced in April, it wasn't just about the home rule, it was also about, yes, I'm very focused on the automatic weapons, and I don't want this to be too broad. I don't want to, I think we need much more discussion before we really open it up to reducing guns and, all this stuff. It's, that I gave some examples then. We need more discussion from people perhaps who have more to, please, and among others, who have more to add, members of the community, whatever. So I would like to keep this focused. I believe in the first resolution that was the first draft, the mayor did admit that it was really a more than just setting weapons. It was really to apply to all guns, and I can understand why A through H makes sense with that regard, but I do feel strongly that at this point, let's take the first step forward and not just open it up, so we can have all kinds of interpretations, and then, it loses, it loses impact. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Sacks. Mr. King.
I'll make a comment that to have I remain, age defines different items for review and enact other such common sense legislation. It's almost as if it's saying not limited to going above and beyond those particular those mentioned in acreage. There are items that we may not be discussing now and be thinking at this point, but it's saying that it should be open to possibility. I would recommend to the council that they consider leaving I in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mrs. Sacks.
Thank you again. I guess common sense legislation, I don't know, use common sense is that, that's most part of where I'm hung up. Because there's just, it's very loaded, excuse the, you know, but it is, that worries me. And it's in two places, in the resolution, and that means we feel strongly, common sense legislation. Like you're talking about legislation, it's a resolution, it's not legislation. So it's murky, and I just don't want to leave it to plans. I agree with that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the amendment?
This is amendment to.
This is the,
To
this was, yes, this was strike item, motion to strike item. Okay. Section. This is not all the whole resolutions, it's just.
Aye. Aye.
Mrs. Wise. Aye. Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Motion carries.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to pass resolution 2023.
Dash 15. Yeah, it's 15, like an error.
That's 15 with the-
Purely coincidence. Just had to get on.
Oh, yes.
Okay, we have motion to adopt as amended by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Mr. King. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Sacks.
I just want to thank you again for the opportunity and for this robust discussion. This is not the last time we'll be talking about this. I hope it's always in a preventative way and it's never in, reactive.
Thank you,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Sacks. And I would also say that, I didn't want to let the perfect be any good here. There were things here that we lost that I would have preferred to have had in, but really still got a lot of this stuff. And I'm really happy that we're going to be passing this. But thank you to all of you for meeting. Having a meeting amongst. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Zach.
Aye.
Mr. Rocco. Aye. Mrs. Wise. Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next is item S, a motion approving emergency IT support service from Starfish Computer for the period of June 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2023. In amount not to exceed by $5,500. Just in brief, this is similar to previous emergency support service. We do have a proposal from Starfish, consistent with the bid that we accepted from them, which Mr. Conville and I are reviewing. I think Mr. King, you were looking at too. And I forwarded to them. And then, but we simply have not gotten together to have a discussion about response to the proposed agreement, and we are in a new month. So I asked for, one more month. It's possible we'll get this done in the next couple of weeks, in which case we'll have it on for the next agenda. If not, there'll probably be another extension while we continue to hash out the agreement itself. But finish line is the site. So it's just to tie us over. Is there a motion?
I have a question.
Sure.
I would just ask if we could possibly have the contract at the next meeting, because I'm approving 1 month now, July, and August, and then if, so if that's possible, that would be great. That if we could have, pass that on emergency. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my preference, but no, we'll see where we are. Between now and then. That's what we'll aim for, but if we don't have that, then we'll have another motion probably for additional IT services going into this. Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion there.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. King, is there a second? I'll second. Second by Mr. Cooney. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, you call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Marshall?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
A very good motion carries. Next is item T, motion to approve additional funding for the 2023 Juneteenth celebration. Mr. Engelbrecht, you have the floor.
Good evening. The planning for the second annual University High Juneteenth celebration is complete. And the Juneteenth celebration committee members, including Eric Williams, Derek Williams, Virginia Benson, Kelly Thomas, Sandra Berry, Tekla DeChance, Deanna Bremer Fisher, and Dr. Alicia Sloan, who slept. We're excited about everything that's in store for the day. This year, the celebration will consist of 2 stages, the main stage being primarily a performance-based stage, and will consist of performances by the Cookie Corral, Councilman Connell and the Footprints of Drew, the performances by the fraternities and sororities that make up the Divine Nine, presentation by the Spread the Love Foundation, and performances by recording artists from the Life Entertainment, including Kane, Nova the Rebel, Mookie Motomio, and Crazy Bone of Bone Thugs and Harmony. The second stage is a community stage sponsored by Dollar Bank and will include greater interactions with the public. Community stage will include yoga instructor Samantha Pierce, Zumba instructors Candace Hall and Janice Hudson, a children's dance performance by Nova's Performing Arts Center, hip hop dance workout by Milo Fit, community forum led by Dr. Alicia Sloan, spoken word performed by Sierra Friedman, and financial literacy talks held throughout the day by Dollar Bank. Originally, along with the $20,200 budgeted for this year's celebration, the Juneteenth committee was able to raise an additional amount of $5,900 that included $2,500 donated by Dollar Bank, a $1,500 donation through Empowerment to Our Community. It's a local nonprofit led by Eric and Karina Williams. Concerned Citizens Community Council donated $1,200. It's a local nonprofit that is led by former City of Cleveland Ward 4 Councilwoman Peter Gardner, and smaller donations that came from police properties in the amount of $500. And the former University Heights Chief Building Official Richard Conti, who donated $200 himself. So the $5,900 was to go towards the event. This amount allowed for the committee to expand the scope of the event, giving the opportunity for the celebration to become what will be the best Juneteenth celebration in the Cleveland region. As part of the planning process, I spoke with the county health department regarding portable toilets at community events. Originally, I had budgeted the same amount of portable toilets as we had last year, which included 4 portable toilets through United Rentals. In April, I was able to get a quote for $1,425.60, which would have covered 6 portable toilets and 2 sinks for the event while staying in budget. After securing the amount required to cover additional entertainment fees, sponsorships, and donations, I received info from the county health department regarding their recommendations for portable toilets and sinks, which I included in the memo which was sent out to you guys earlier. The recommendations included 22 toilets for an event of 1,000 people or more. After speaking with the county and letting them know of our plans, they felt that 16 portable toilets and 4 sinks would be adequate for the event, as we already have 2 toilets and 2 sinks at the park. The updated plan for the event is for 4 toilets and 1 sink to be placed at each of the 4 corners of the park. The amount needed to cover the 10 extra portable toilets and 2 sinks for the event will total the amount of $1,684.80. Additionally, as part of the planning process for the event, we've had safety meetings with Chief Rogers and Chief Perko. During our initial meeting, Chief Rogers recommended additional security who would be able to assist. The total of 8 police officers who will be present during the event. I reached out to Tenable Protective Services and to Willow Security, were 2 of the companies that typically cover large events in the Cleveland region. Willow Security responded, and we met with Willow Security at Walter Stinson Park with Chief Rogers, Chief Perko, along with Captain Boylan and Lieutenant Ryan. We originally had an agreement in place, but today, after learning of an opinion from our law director, Willow Security threatened to back out of supplying security officers for the celebration. So I immediately called the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department and spoke with Lieutenant Stephen Barczyk, who was willing to assist the city in supplying manpower who could cover to assist our police department for the event. The county sheriff's manpower would help with 10 police or with 10 officers, not police officers. Sheriff. And Chief Rogers spoke with Willow Security about the need for security around the stage. Willow will now be providing 6 unarmed security officers at $30 an hour throughout the day for security at the 2 stages at an amount of $1,980. Cost of the city for the 10 officers from the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department is $11,000. Sheriff's Department personnel and security officers will be present at the park from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Additional tents were also part of the original security plan from Willow Security. And the original quote for the tent over the Dollar Bank stage was updated to include 3 additional tents to help control the flow of ingress and egress traffic through the park, with 2 tents being located at the Fenwick side of the park, 1 tent being located at the Saybrook side. The updated quote for the 4 tents in total is $1,025. Willow Security also recommended bicycle racks to go around the stages and provided the contact with North Coast Event Services to supply the bike racks. After receiving the dimensions of the stages, North Coast sent me a quote. Bicycle racks around the stages themselves. The quote was updated after receiving the info about the additional recommendation from Willow Security last Thursday in fencing off Greenville Road, allowing a total of 3 ingress and egress points from the park into the street. The revised quote as of June 1st is for the amount of $1,568.30. That's for 4 tents total. Therefore, I respectfully request that City Council allow for the sponsorships and donations totaling $5,900 to be added to the original budget, $20,200 in order to cover the cost of entertainment stage, sound, and 6 portable toilets that are part of the original budget. I also respectfully request an increase of $1,684.80 to cover needed infrastructure, including an additional 10 portable toilets, bringing the total amount of portable toilets at the park to 16, along 4 additional sinks, which again will be at the 4 corners of the park. And at the request of the police department and the original recommendations from Willow Security, I respectfully ask for an additional amount of $15,573.30, which will provide 10 officers from the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, 3 tents to control ingress and egress traffic through the park, 6 security officers from Willow Security covering the 2 stages, and bicycle racks to control the ingress and egress traffic. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Mrs. Swans.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I want to make a couple comments, but I do want to amend the motion to actually put a dollar amount and to exceed the $15,573.30. We could do that after my comments. We did discuss in our safety meeting, Mr. Engelbrecht answered questions. We had a good discussion on why we need this and just to make this a successful, safe event. You know, the one thing I think we need to keep in mind for next year is to start early. You know, probably September. if we're gonna have such a big event and possibly even, you know, reach out to some of our neighboring cities. If this is such, you know, a powerful, great event, maybe we should use an amphitheater like something like Green Park or something, I know. Mayfield has an amphitheater also, there's not so many that have on the east side, but, you know, maybe we should merge with cities and make it bigger. Yeah, a more regional effort. But I think in terms, so we're not stuck with the safety issue and with all these other things that came up, you know, like 2 weeks before the event. To just, we can really start planning sometime with that, we can be more comfortable with the whole, you know, and we have, you know, budget here, you know, that's coming up also, make sure that that's appropriate as well. But I want to thank Mr. Engelmann for this great event that's going to be happening, and it's really important for our city. So I will make a motion though to amend agenda T to not to exceed 15,573.30.
I'm sorry, the 15.5 is just for the security. That didn't include the actual amount for the additional porta potties as well. The additional porta potties was an additional $1,684.80. The grand total of the porta potties along with the security comes to $17,258.10.
So that's what I asked, remember, during the meeting, and then we said, no, it's the 15,000, so it is.
It is 17,258. That's the grand.
That's what, okay, so. I'm withdrawing my motion.
Okay. Right, so were you done, Mrs. Moss?
Well, I wanted to amend it, but we're having a discussion first, so that's fine.
All right.
Mrs.
Sachs, go.
Thank you. Thank you again. I mentioned this. We don't know the name. So 2 things. One is, I brought it up in the meeting before, and Mr. Kennedy is here, maybe. Excellent. This is great. They have a narrative that's wonderful, but I would also really appreciate an Excel spreadsheet with budget. And that way we can see the line items, we can see maybe comparatively, you know, what we did last year, and then for planning for next year, and you know what our targets are and how that works. And I would actually like to see that for all our big events, you know, the Memorial Day Parade and so on and so forth. But we're talking about Juneteenth right now. So that would be something I appreciate. Okay. The second thing is, I don't want to give you more to do, but I'm just asking if the committee considered this or would consider it. It's too late, but voter registration booth, do you have something like that? I would have liked that.
We do
Memorial Day Parade.
have we have the county board of elections.
Okay,
They will be one of the vendors.
okay. Thank you, wonderful. But even for the recreation, committee, you know, if we have events like this, it just, we don't want to miss those opportunities. Thank you very much.
I'm hopeful that we will have voter registration. I think that was in the words. Yes. Okay, Mr. King.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that for that's going to make motion, we also need to include language of allowing the money from the donors to be applied to the budget as well.
I mean,
Just need a total not to exceed amount. The budget right now is $20,200. So I would just need from the expense side to know what number you're plugging. Not to exceed.
because the revenue will just net it out.
Yeah, revenue's already separately being recorded. So we just need to set what the appropriations for the total. The total would be $17,258.10 plus the $5,900, which would be with the $20,200. So the total would be that. You're talking like 42,000.
Oh, so what you're saying is there's an additional 5,900, you're just offsetting it. Oh, so that's not 70,000.
Well, no, it's not offsetting. The 5,900 was the sponsor. It's meant to, yeah, helped the city get members from the Life Entertainment and Crazy Bone, along with the yoga and the Zumba and the other activities.
100%, I'm glad we had that, but the total expense is gonna be an additional 23,150. With what you're saying,
Yes.
no, I'm so glad you got it.
I get 43, 358,
That's right.
Yeah.
We needed to go.
43, 358, 10.
Okay, so I will make a motion that the expenses should not exceed. Well, this motion though, right now, the way it's written is additional funding, so the additional funding is 23,150, because we already have 20,000 and change.
Why
But
don't we do it this way? Why don't I ask, is there a motion to approve additional funding in the amount of 17,258.10 to bring the total appropriation to 43,358.10.
It doesn't include the 100. What you need to do is have the motion say you're gonna increase the appropriation for this amount. 1,200, 43,358 dollars. Is there a motion?
so
Motion by Mrs. Weiss, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Monk. Any further discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks? Aye. Mrs. Marshall? Aye. Mrs. Wise? Aye. Mr. Lot?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Very good, motion carries. Thank you, Springler, for your ongoing work on this. All right. Which brings us now to letter U, motion to authorize the mayor to execute land lease and easement with Heights Jewish Center. I'm gonna turn this over to
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I'm going on memory here because I actually gave my copy of the lease to Mr. Chun earlier today. There will be a drawing that's attached to the lease, and the drawing has been agreed upon conceptually between the Heights Jewish Center and the city. That will depict an area of 2 rows of parking that will be reserved exclusively for the Heights Jewish Center's congregants. That 2-row reservation, if you will, is consistent with past practices and the current use of the site. There's really only a couple of substantive changes to the lease, which has been in place for nearly 40 years. And that is that there are different earlier hours for that the city is to attempt in good faith to accomplish the snow removal. And there are new notice provisions put in place in the event that the city is going to use any portion of that parking lot stage for leaves in the fall. It was a very friendly negotiation, certainty in that it took a long time and there were some odd circumstances that had transpired over time that we needed to work through. One of those circumstances was that there had been a tennis court parcel that the Heights Jewish Center had deeded over to the city many years ago. That parcel was recorded in the name of the city of University Heights, and we had a recorded copy, but somehow never got onto the county recorder's records. Mr. Kennedy helped us get to the bottom of that. Consequence of that was that even though the title of the transfer, even though we had recorded the piece, county recorder had no record of it, so they were billing the Heights Jewish Center for the taxes on the parcel for a number of years. Eventually, the Heights Jewish Center realized they shouldn't be taxed for that, and so it took us a while to work through that issue with the county and get them to essentially clear that tax bill up. There was a small payment that we made a few years ago.
Yeah, I think we reimbursed them
For interest equity,
some of what they paid.
and then the rest of the lead. Anyway, it's not a very complicated lease. It allows the city to utilize the there for use of the pool, and it's a long-standing relationship that I think remains strong.
I would agree. I think you covered it well. Is there a motion to authorize the mayor to execute the lease with Exeter Center? Oh, okay.
Thank you. So last year we had, some problems with the leaves accumulating there, public dumping. We were, under the impression that we could not, whatever reason, do overtime to, or to send the leaves to the yard where we do take our leaves over the weekend, even though the website says they are open on Saturdays. We also were under the impression that we could not outsource it because if we had limited manpower that would do that to take care of the leaves, the Minutemen, for example. But I read the collective bargaining agreement and that should have been okay if we exhausted all of the possibilities of utilizing our own service personnel. So I really hope it does not. Are there any parameters in here? I find that hard to believe that Heights Jewish Center would agree to the same, to be open to the same situation that they had to contend with last year. So does this affect that, you know?
We discussed with them what happened and they have agreed that to our reasonable use, similar to what happened before, but not exactly. Kurtz Brothers was closed. I don't know what the website said. It doesn't matter what the website said. They were not accepting meetings.
I think there were two material things that were worked into the language of the lease that gave Heights Jewish Center comfort. I'm hesitant to put words in their mouth, but I can just try to characterize the negotiation on what CEMA says. One is that there's language, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that indicates that that lot will only be used for that purpose in emergent circumstances where there's no other alternative. And the other, and this seemed to be the biggest issue to them, is that they received prior notice that it's going to occur. So that they can let, their folks know, having been notified.
Is there written notice, prior written notice?
It's in the agreement, but yeah, it's either prior or it's prompt. I think it may be one business day, so it's in the lease. The idea here is that one of the problems last time was that the service director had not returned phone calls to Heights Jewish Center, and ultimately they reached out to me while I was traveling, and then I had the difficulty of trying to reach Mr. Corney while I was in Chicago. Managed to eventually do that and square some things away, but by then the leads had been there for certain things. So, we all agreed that shouldn't have happened like that. And, but they also understood that there were exigent circumstances here that led to that situation. And once we sat down and explained what they all were, they were satisfied. I think, again, like Conville said, like Mr. McConnell said, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they seem to be satisfied. And the evidence that satisfaction is just the most modest change to the agreement here, with understanding that under similar circumstances, they would be open to having this occur again, as long as we are more closely working with them and keeping them apprised as to the wins, whys, and wherefores, and how quickly we look at things.
Yeah, and I would just add that particular provision, when we met with them, we wrote that out during the meeting. So we had to wrote that out and we put and everyone agreed to the language at that meeting.
Yeah, there was expressed explicit discussion about it. This wasn't a matter of somebody writing something in and then somebody else not noticing. We specifically talked.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both.
Is there a motion to approve?
So,
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss, is there a second? Second by Mr. King. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, please call the roll.
Mrs. Zach. Aye. Mrs. Michael. Aye. Mrs. Flood. Aye. Mrs. Rod.
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Motion carries, thank you. Next item is item B, motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing whether proceeding personnel and real estate matters. The administration is nothing. We're asking you to stay even a moment longer on executive session. So we will then move to committee reports.
lost that page, the agenda. I think the first one up is building and housing. Is there a report from that meeting?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There will be a building and housing committee meeting at 6 o'clock on 6/1.
Thank you. Community outreach, Brian Kim. No report, ma'am. Thank you. Economic development, John Rowe. Report. Finance, Sean West.
Yes, there's a finance and finance late committee meeting on June 27th at 6 o'clock.
You're very good. Thank you. Mrs. Weiss, recreation, Kristen.
There was an email that I sent an email to the other recreation committee members. We're going to have a direct meeting after the summer break. A few items for discussion regarding potential law courts artwork on the utility boxes. Coming up with perhaps a outdoor some fitness areas within the city. Some of that. We're going to gather some information. The other members are welcome to join me. They'll be on the notes, but we'll hopefully meet shortly after we get back from the break.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Safety, Mrs. Marshall. And no report.
No report.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Service utilities, Mrs.
Thank you. The Service and Utilities Committee met on May 24th, Wednesday, May 24th. Stacy, right, Vice President of SCS Engineering made a presentation regarding their proposal to develop a plan and associated costs for implementation of ordinance 2023-05, loose recycling services, not to exceed $22,000. This will include a video call or two, and we hope an in-person visit to our city to assess our service needs for this purpose, to better understand and improve the collection process. Ms. Demers said she, after discussion amongst those in attendance, that she would follow up to consider speaking to several people, including mayor, service department, or whoever the supervisor or assistant director is, service collectors directly, finance director, and myself. So we look forward to seeing those next steps. The other thing, agenda item B, just for information in case people are having issues, they shouldn't be anymore, but just in case on public record, you can contact the service department at servicedepartment@universityheights.com. Do I have that correct? Okay. And it's the regular number 216-932-7800, lead extension 215. 213.
Yeah, I mean, 215 is not accepting messages, but 215 will refer you back to places that are. So 215 is and will again be the service director's extension.
Okay, so let us know. Press that magic button on the website, the council and administration, and we'll do our best to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Snipes. Ready the whole, Mrs.
Yes, thank you. There will be committee of the whole meeting posted shortly to start the process of choosing a new council member.
Okay, thank you. Reports of special committees and taking of action thereon, are there any? Seeing none, unfinished and miscellaneous business, is there any? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion adjourned by Mrs. Sacks, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas will call the roll. Okay, as we adjourn, reminder, Tuesday, June 20th is the next city council. Meeting is duration.
Sean, I saw you wave. I'm sorry. I mean, I wanted to call you, but I didn't change the last. Oh, it did. All right, thank you. I'm around. Oh, yeah, I'll get it. I'll be dragging a little tail, because I'll be, I got the, you gotta see, yeah, you gotta sing out, but yeah, my guys will be there. But you know what, I'll be at NOAC. Yeah, my crew will be bells on. It's that important. No matter what happens, I'll sing out. Right. Yeah.
I was thinking, that got all hooked up so quick, but I would have gone to sing out, and I would have, because I do the stage over there, so I stand by the stage.
Yeah, I'm singing.
I know, there better be a video on.
I imagine, I don't.
Wait, is Spud doing anything with it?
No, he's not at the chair.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah, but I am,
Yeah, well, I just got,
Yeah.
you're definitely seeing me Juneteenth because I just.
yeah, there's a three of us, they're trading solos back and forth on the songs.
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna be helping with Juneteenth.
Sounds good. Hey, Mike. Oh. Portland.
You just found.
Yeah, I've not been,
But
but I.
You said that meeting in the fire.
Oh.
We had to have meetings in the fire department because we couldn't get all the people
yeah,
upset.
I remember we had a meeting at John.
Oh, yeah.
That was on BC.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. That's okay. So we ended here.
No, it's not that. I have it.
Yeah, I do. So I just, so. Then I walk into the. Take care. Yeah, I got shaker, I got my niece's graduation tomorrow. Yeah, I'm working it actually. No. Yes.
I'm wondering how was their first meeting?
What was that meeting?
What was that meeting?